Plato versus Diogenes, Order and Freedom. Documentary to fall asleep. In the quiet hours of ancient Athens, when oil lamps flickered and the city softened into shadow, two figures embodied opposite answers to the same human question. How should we live? One believed that order, reason, and carefully shaped institutions could lift humanity toward the good. The other believed that freedom, stripped of convention and desire, was the only honest path. Their names were Plato and Diogenes, and their disagreement still hums beneath modern life like a low, persistent chord. Plato was born into privilege and promise. A student of Socrates, he inherited a faith in reason sharpened by tragedy. The execution of his teacher convinced him that unexamined societies could kill their wisest citizens. From that wound grew a vision, a world guided by knowledge, where truth was not a matter of opinion, but a structure as real as geometry. In Plato's telling, reality itself had layers. What we touch and see is only a copy. The true forms, justice, beauty, goodness, exist beyond the senses, steady and perfect. To live well, then, is to align the soul with these forms, to cultivate order inside oneself, and by extension, in the city. Order, for Plato, was not mere control. It was harmony. In the Republic, he imagined a city where each part performed its proper role. Rulers guided by wisdom, guardians by courage, producers by moderation, education disciplined desire, law-trained character. Freedom without structure, he feared, collapsed into appetite. A city that mistook license for liberty would slide toward tyranny, not because it loved power, but because it refused limits. Plato's calm confidence rested on a belief that the human soul longs for pattern, and that reason, patiently cultivated, could provide it. Diogenes arrived at the same city with a very different answer. Where Plato built schools, Diogenes took to the streets. Where Plato refined language, Diogenes sharpened mockery. A follower of the cynic path, he believed civilization itself was the disease. Laws, manners, money, status, these were not guides to virtue, but disguises for fear. To be free, Diogenes argued, one must need almost nothing. He slept where he wished, owned little, and treated convention as a joke unworthy of respect. If Plato sought the good by ascending toward ideals, Diogenes sought it by stripping life bare. Hunger teaches what is necessary. Cold clarifies desire. Shame, he thought, was a social invention, an invisible leash. He performed philosophy as a lived refusal. When praised thinkers spoke in abstractions, Diogenes answered with acts. When power demanded reverence, he answered with indifference. Freedom, to him, was not a theory, but a daily practice of refusal. Their clash is often remembered as theatrical, even comic. The story goes that Plato defined a human being as a featherless biped, prompting Diogenes to pluck a chicken and declare, "Behold, Plato's man." Laughter followed, but the point lingered. Plato's definitions reached upward, elegant and fragile. Diogenes dragged them back to earth. Where Plato trusted reason to refine humanity, Diogenes suspected reason had been recruited to excuse vanity. Yet the disagreement ran deeper than insults. Plato believed desire must be educated. Diogenes believed desire must be disarmed. Plato feared chaos. Diogenes feared hypocrisy. Plato built a ladder to the good. Diogenes kicked the ladder away and asked why anyone needed it. One looked to the heavens for order. The other looked at a full stomach and an unafraid heart. Listen closely, and you can hear their voices in modern debates. Plato speaks whenever institutions promise improvement through design, schools, constitutions, ethical frameworks. He whispers that freedom needs form, that the soul requires training, that without shared standards, we drift. Diogenes answers whenever someone rejects status, simplifies life, or mocks empty prestige. He laughs at the anxious chase for recognition and asks what, exactly, we cannot live without. And yet, for all their opposition, the two philosophers share a surprising kinship. Both distrusted appearances. Both demanded that life be examined. Both believed philosophy should change how one lives, not merely how one speaks. Plato's academy and Diogenes's barrel were different classrooms, but each taught a discipline, one of ascent, one of subtraction. Perhaps the tension between order and freedom is not a problem to be solved, but a balance to be held. Too much order hardens into control. Too much freedom dissolves into neglect. Plato reminds us that societies need vision and structure to protect what is best in us. Diogenes reminds us that vision becomes tyranny when it forgets the body, the moment, the simple truth of sufficiency. As the night deepens, imagine Athens quiet at last. Plato returns to his manuscripts, tracing careful lines toward the good. Diogenes settles into sleep beneath the open sky, untroubled by tomorrow. Between them stretches the human condition, forever torn between building and letting go, between shaping the world and stepping aside from it. And so the question lingers, gentle and unresolved, as a lullaby for the thoughtful mind. Do we become free by perfecting order, or by learning how little we truly need? Close your eyes now. Let the screen fade from your awareness, leaving only the sound of my voice and the velvet weight of your own eyelids. Imagine you are standing on the hill of the Pnyx, the rocky gathering place of ancient Athens. It is twilight, that precise fleeting moment the Greeks called Lycosaura, the time between the wolf and the dog, when the light is just dim enough to blur the difference between wildness and domesticity. The air around you is cooling, releasing the heat of the day from the limestone beneath your feet, and it carries a complex perfume, the dry, dusty scent of sun-baked pine, the sharp tang of olive wood smoke drifting from the pottery district, and the faint, salty breath of the Aegean Sea miles away. You can feel the breeze, gentle and rhythmic, brushing against your skin like a sheer linen chiton. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your city and local time in the comments so we can see where everyone is listening from. Now, let the breath leave your lungs, slow and steady, matching the deepening blue of the sky above the Parthenon. This is not the white, pristine city of museum marble, but a living, breathing place painted in ochre, terracotta, and blue, now softening into grayscale as the sun dips below the mountains. In the distance, the agora, the bustling marketplace, is quieting down. Merchants are packing away their jars of oil and baskets of figs, their voices low murmurs carried on the wind. It is here, in this landscape of stone and shadow, that our two guides begin their divergent paths. Historians still argue whether the city was truly as divided as the stories suggest, or if the rivalry between Plato and Diogenes was exaggerated by later writers who loved a good drama. But the spiritual division was real enough. To the northwest, in a grove of sacred olive trees, the academy stands silent, a place where mathematics and silence build a fortress against the chaos of the world. To the south, in the dusty corners of the marketplace, A man curls up inside a large ceramic vessel, often mistranslated as a tub, but truly a pythos, a giant storage jar for grain or wine, turned on its side to house a philosopher who needs no roof. The city holds them both, the man who looks up to the eternal stars and the man who looks down at the stray dogs, finding wisdom in their ability to sleep anywhere, untroubled by the ambitions that keep the rest of Athens awake. We begin here, suspended in the balance between the stone and the shadow, ready to drift back through the centuries to see how this great argument began. The air shifts now, growing cooler as we slip backward through the years, settling into the spring of 399 BC. The sun is high and bright over the wrestling grounds, where the dust hangs in golden motes, suspended in the stillness of the afternoon. Here, we find a young man named Aristocles, though history will remember him only by his nickname Plato, a word that means broad, likely given to him by his wrestling coach because of his wide, powerful shoulders. He is 29 years old, a creature of pure potential, born into one of the most distinguished families in Athens. Imagine him standing there, the sweat drying on his skin, his chest heaving slightly from exertion. He is not yet the bearded sage of the marble busts. He is vibrant, ambitious, and deeply artistic. He writes tragedies, crafting verses in the style of the old masters, dreaming of winning the prize at the festivals of Dionysus. His life is a straight, shining road toward political power and poetic fame. But on this particular day, the road fractures. The young wrestler's attention is not on the sand of the gymnasium, but on a memory of a voice that rasps and prods, annoying and mesmerizing in equal measure. It belongs to an old man named Socrates. Socrates is the antithesis of the golden boy. He is famously ugly, with a snub nose and bulging eyes, often described as looking like a Silenus or a satyr. He walks barefoot through the marketplace, wearing the same threadbare cloak winter and summer, stopping prominent citizens to ask them questions that seem simple at first, but soon unravel their entire understanding of the world. "What is courage?" he asks a general. "What is piety?" he asks a priest. And when they stumble, caught in their own contradictions, Socrates just smiles, claiming he knows nothing at all, which is the only thing that makes him wise. It is a gentle, maddening irony. The young Plato is captivated. He sees in Socrates something firmer than the shifting sands of politics. He sees a mind that cannot be bought, a soul that cannot be frightened. But Athens, bruised by war and plague, has lost its patience with eccentric questions. The city is tired. It wants order, not inquiry. And so, the democratic jury casts its stones into the urns. Guilty. The charge is corrupting the youth and inventing new gods. The sentence is death. We move now to the final scene, not in the noisy court, but in the quiet, dim cell carved into the rock near the agora. The atmosphere here is heavy, hushed, like a library after closing. Friends have gathered, weeping, clutching their robes, bargaining with guards, planning escapes that the old man refuses to take. Socrates sits on the edge of his bed, rubbing his leg where the chains have just been removed, remarking with a strange, detached curiosity on the pleasure that follows pain, how they are two heads of the same creature. He is calm. The cup of hemlock is brought in, a small clay vessel holding the dark, bitter liquid. Historians still argue about the specific details of this moment, whether the poison truly acted as peacefully as Plato later described, or if the reality was more brutal. But in the story that shapes the Western mind, it is a scene of supreme dignity. Socrates takes the cup without a tremble. He offers a libation to the gods, prays for a safe journey to the next world, and drinks. The narrative camera pulls back now to find Plato. And here is a curious historical truth. Plato is not in the cell. In his own dialogue, Phaedo, which recounts this death, he includes a tiny, devastating line spoken by another character. Plato, I think, was ill. It is the only time he names himself in all his dialogues, and it is to mark his absence. Was he truly sick with a fever? Or was he sick with a grief so profound his body refused to witness the end? We see him in his own room, miles away, perhaps staring at a blank wall, waiting for the news he knows is coming. The silence of the house presses against his ears. When the news arrives that the wisest man in Athens is cold, that the intellect which questioned the stars has been extinguished by the vote of a confused mob, something in the young wrestler breaks. But it breaks the way a bone breaks to heal stronger. He looks at his scroll of tragedies, his carefully meted poetry about gods and heroes. They seem suddenly flimsy, shadows, lies. How can poetry matter when a city can kill the truth? Legend tells us that shortly after this, Plato gathered his poems and tossed them into a fire. Watch the flames in your mind's eye, the papyrus curling, blackening, the words of the tragedies turning to ash and floating up into the Athenian night. It is a ritual of purification. He is burning the golden boy. He is burning the ambition for political office. If the world is this broken, he decides, he will not simply live in it. He will construct a new way to understand it. He realizes that the senses, the eyes that saw the jury vote, the ears that heard the sentence, are liars. They only show us the changing, decaying world. Truth must be elsewhere. This is the birth of the forms. In the quiet trauma of that loss, Plato begins to build a fortress of the mind. He imagines a realm where a perfect, unchangeable justice exists, untouched by corrupt juries. He imagines a beauty that never fades or wrinkles. He decides that the physical world, the world of mud and sickness and hemlock, is just a poor reflection of that higher reality. It is a coping mechanism turned into a metaphysics. He retreats from the chaos of the streets to the order of the intellect. It is a somber start, yet there is a strange comfort in his resolve. Plato transforms his grief into geometry. He decides that if men are to be good, they cannot rely on their instincts. They must be taught, guided, and structured like a well-built temple. The chaos must be walled out. Meanwhile, as Plato stares into the embers of his burning poems, seeking a way to fix the world from the top down, another reaction to Socrates' death is brewing. Not far away, the story of the old man's execution travels down the coast, eventually reaching the ears of a banker's son in a distant colony. He does not think of building a perfect city. He hears that a man died for speaking the truth, and he wonders why the truth required a defense in the first place. He laughs, a sharp barking sound, at the absurdity of it all. If Plato is the grief that builds a cathedral, this other figure is the laughter that shatters the stained glass to let the fresh air in. The sun sets fully now over Athens. The wrestler sleeps, his dreams filled with perfect triangles and philosopher kings. But the wind is picking up, blowing dust across the agora, swirling around the corners where the stray dogs gather. The night is vast, and it holds room for more than one kind of wisdom. As we leave the silent house of Plato, we drift toward the chaotic, salty air of a port city on the Black Sea, where a scandal is about to birth a radical freedom. The darkness is gentle here, covering the flaws of the world, inviting us to look not at what is lost, but at what remains when everything else is taken away. Let the imagination drift north now, far from the sun-bleached stones of Athens, across the choppy, dark waters of the Aegean, through the narrow throat of the Hellespont, and into the vast, brooding expanse of the Black Sea. Here, on a peninsula that curls like a scythe into the grey waves, lies the city of Sinope. It is a place of commerce and cold winds, a colony where the Greek world touches the wilder, unknown lands of the Scythians. The air here tastes different, sharper, laced with the salt of a sea that feels ancient and unforgiving. In this city, the rhythm of life is dictated not by philosophers debating in the shade, but by the clinking of coins and the heavy thud of cargo being unloaded on the docks. It is here, around the year 412 BC, that we find a young man named Diogenes working in the very heart of the city's structure. The Mint. His father, Hicisias, is a banker and a prominent official, a man entrusted with the purity of the silver and the weight of the gold. Imagine the atmosphere of the Mint, the heat of the furnace, the metallic tang that coats the back of the throat, the rhythmic striking of hammers stamping the city's emblem onto distinct, round discs. This is a world of absolute definition. A coin is worth exactly what the stamp says it is. It is the ultimate symbol of convention, of trust in its system. To work here is to serve the most rigid form of order. But Diogenes is restless. There is a story woven into the fabric of his legend that he, or perhaps his father, journeyed to the Oracle of Delphi to ask for guidance. The question was likely standard: what must I do to succeed? Or, how shall I find my way? The Pythia, the priestess who breathed the vapors of the earth, gave an answer that was typically riddling: deface the currency. In Greek, the phrase is parakaratin to nomisma. It is a pun, a linguistic trap. Nomisma means currency or coin, but it shares a root with nomos, meaning custom or law. Historians still argue whether Diogenes misunderstood the oracle or understood it perfectly from the start. Did the god mean counterfeit the money or change the values of society? Back in the dusty, heat-soaked Mint of Sinope, the young Diogenes takes the advice literally. Whether out of political protest against a pro-Persian faction or a simple chaotic desire to test the boundaries of the world, he begins to sabotage the coinage. Imagine him there, late at night, the oil lamp casting long, jumping shadows against the stone walls. He takes a chisel. He takes the heavy silver profiles of tyrants and gods, and he masks them. He scratches the smooth surfaces. He renders the currency invalid. It is a shocking act of vandalism. To deface the coin is to attack the city's soul, its trustworthiness, its very identity. It is not long before the crime is discovered. The consequences are swift and devastating. Hicisias is thrown into prison, and the young Diogenes is stripped of everything: his citizenship, his home, his possessions, and his reputation. The verdict is exile. In the ancient world, exile was a fate often considered worse than death. To be a citizen was to have a place in the universe. To be an exile was to be a ghost, a piece of driftwood floating without protection, legal standing, or family. It was a sentence of absolute vulnerability. Most men would have crumbled, weeping at the city gates, begging for mercy. But here is where the lullaby of history takes a strange, gentle turn. As Diogenes walks out of the heavy gates of Sinope, leaving behind the only life he has ever known, he does not look back with regret. He looks at the road stretching out before him, a ribbon of dust winding through olive groves and along the rocky coast, and he feels a sudden, terrifying lightness. The burden of being the banker's son is gone. The anxiety of protecting his wealth is gone. The need to maintain appearances, to wear the right tunic, to speak the right words at the dinner parties, it has all evaporated. He realizes, perhaps with a shock that settles into a deep calm, that he is still breathing. The sun still warms his skin. The wind still cools his brow. The world has not ended because he lost his place in it. In fact, the world has just opened up. He carries nothing but a staff and a cloak, and yet he feels richer than the men back in the mint counting their damaged silver. He has inadvertently fulfilled the deeper meaning of the oracle. He has begun to deface the currency of human values, trading the heavy, counterfeit coin of social status for the raw, unrefined gold of natural freedom. As he travels south, moving slowly through the landscapes of Greece, a transformation occurs. He sleeps in temples or under trees. He eats whatever he can find, figs dropped on the roadside, onions, crusts of bread given by strangers. He watches the animals, the mice that scurry in the dark, unconcerned with shadows, the birds that sing without needing an audience. He begins to see that nature has provided everything a human being truly needs, and that civilization is merely a complicated machine designed to make us forget that simple truth. There is a quiet beauty in this descent. It is a shedding of skins. The young banker dissolves, and the philosopher emerges, not through books, but through the rhythm of walking. He is learning the lesson that Plato, back in Athens, is trying to learn through geometry. But Diogenes is learning it through his feet. Plato seeks the form of the good above the sky. Diogenes finds the good in a drink of cold water from a stream when he is thirsty. One day on his journey, he watches a mouse running across the floor of a shelter. He observes that the mouse does not look for a soft bed, does not fear the dark, and does not yearn for the luxuries of Sinope. It is perfectly at home in its own life. Diogenes smiles. He realizes that fear is a product of losing things, and since he has nothing left to lose, he is invincible. He eventually arrives in Athens, the great city of wisdom. But he enters not as a student seeking a teacher, but as a man who has already graduated from the school of misfortune. He finds his way to the gymnasium of Cynosarges, the place for white dogs, or outsiders, where a philosopher named Antisthenes speaks of virtue. Antisthenes had been a student of Socrates, just like Plato, but he had drawn a different conclusion. He taught that virtue was enough for happiness, and that pleasure was a trap. Diogenes listens, leaning on his staff, his clothes dusty from the road, his beard unkempt. When he approaches Antisthenes, the older man, grumpy and preferring solitude, tries to chase him away with a stick. Diogenes does not flinch. He lowers his head and says, "Strike, for you will find no wood hard enough to keep me away from you, so long as I think you have something to say." It is the first true clash of his new life, a demand to be heard, a refusal to be shamed. He has arrived in the city of Plato, but he brings with him the cold, clearing wind of the Black Sea. He is the exile who found his home in the world itself, As the stars wheel overhead, marking the passage of time over a sleeping Athens, the banker's son curls up on the hard ground, wraps his cloak around his shoulders, and sleeps the deep, untroubled sleep of a man who owns nothing and therefore possesses everything. The stage is now set. The architect of ideas is building his academy, and the demolisher of illusions has just walked through the gates. Leave the noise of the market behind now. Let the shouting of fishmongers and the barking of stray dogs fade into the distance as we walk northwest, away from the crowded heart of Athens. We are following a road lined with tombs of ancient heroes, a path that leads out of the city walls and into the countryside. The air changes here. It becomes greener, cooler, heavy, with the scent of pine resin and the damp, sweet decay of fallen leaves. We are entering the grove of Academus, a sacred park that has belonged to the city for centuries, but which is about to become the birthplace of the Western mind. It is here, around the year 387 BC, that Plato, now in his 40s, establishes a sanctuary for the soul. He has returned from his wanderings. Stories say he traveled to Egypt to learn from priests and to Italy to study with the Pythagoreans, those mystics who believed the universe was made of numbers. He comes back to Athens not to engage in the brawling politics of the assembly, but to build a fortress of quiet. He purchases a small plot of land within this public park and gathers a community of friends and students. We call it the Academy, but do not imagine a stiff university with lecture halls and tuition fees. Imagine, instead, a religious guild, a theasos dedicated to the muses. It is a fraternity of seekers, walking among the plane trees, bound together by a shared hunger for what is real. There is a legend that hangs over the entrance of this place, a phantom inscription that history has never quite been able to locate, but has never been willing to forget. It is said that above the gateway, Plato carved the words, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter here." Whether the sign was carved in wood, stone, or merely in the minds of those who walked through, the warning was real. But why geometry? Why would a place dedicated to virtue and politics require knowledge of triangles and circles? To understand this, you must picture Plato kneeling in the sand of the gymnasium floor, a smooth stick in his hand. He draws a circle. It is a good circle, round and pleasing to the eye. But look closer. In the soft, granular dust, there are imperfections. The line wavers where his hand shook. It has thickness and depth. It is not a true circle. A true circle exists only in the mind, a collection of points equidistant from a center, possessing no width, no color, no weight. The circle in the sand is just a shadow, a temporary mimic of the eternal form. For Plato, this is the key to everything. If we can train the mind to see the perfect circle that isn't there, we can eventually train the soul to see the perfect justice, the perfect good, and the perfect beauty that lie behind the messy, violent confusion of human life. Mathematics is not a tool for building bridges or counting taxes here. It is a spiritual ladder. It is the art of turning the eye of the soul away from the shifting darkness of the physical world and toward the steady light of truth. The atmosphere in the academy is one of intense hypnotic focus. The days are structured, rhythmic, almost monastic. The students rise with the sun. They eat simple meals, olives, figs, bread, watered wine, believing that a heavy stomach clouds the intellect. They walk in pairs under the canopy of the olive trees, the silver-green leaves shimmering above them like a ceiling of living mosaic. They debate, but not to win arguments like the sophists in the city. They debate to help each other remember truths they believed they knew before they were born. Plato moves among them, a presence of grounding gravity. The broad shoulders are now draped in the fine wool of a philosopher's cloak. He is no longer the wrestler who solves problems with force, nor the poet who solves them with metaphor. He is the dialectician. He poses problems that have no easy answers. What is sameness? What is difference? If the one exists, what follows for the many? The air hums with the soft murmur of these questions, a sound like bees in a hive, constructing a honeycomb of logic. Historians still argue about the physical reality of the school. Was it a building, or just a favorite walking path? But the spiritual reality is distinct. It is a place of order. Plato believes that the universe is not a random accident, but a cosmos, a word that means ornament or well-ordered arrangement. To study here is to bring that order into your own chest. It is to tame the wild horses of emotion and yoke them to the chariot of reason. It is a place of safety. Here, no juries vote to kill wise men. Here, definitions do not change because a mob gets angry. Here, a triangle is a triangle, forever and always, safe from the corruption of time. Yet, there is a softness to this rigor. We are told that Plato was a gentleman with his friends, reserving his sharpness for his writing. There is a story that he once raised his hand to strike a slave who had angered him, then froze, holding his arm in the air for minutes. When a friend asked what he was doing, he replied, "I am punishing the anger." He would not strike until the emotion had passed, proving that even the master of the academy had to practice the geometry of his own emotions every day. As the afternoon light slants through the trees, turning the dust motes into suspended gold, the academy feels less like a school and more like a garden of the mind. The chaos of Athens feels miles away, though it is only a short walk. Here, the world is intelligible. It makes sense. It has rules. If you follow the rules of logic, you will arrive at the truth, just as surely as the sun rises. But outside these walls, the world is not geometric. It is messy, smelling of sweat and garlic. It is full of people who do not care about the definition of a circle, but care deeply about the price of fish. And while Plato builds his invisible city of perfect forms in the quiet grove, a different kind of philosopher is making himself at home in the loud, dirty, beautiful reality of the marketplace. The sun begins to set on the academy now. The students pack away their wax tablets and styluses. The crickets begin their evening chorus, a rhythmic, pulsing sound that rivals the precision of any mathematical proof. The calmness here is profound, a lullaby of structure. Everything is in its place. The stars are appearing, the ultimate symbols of fiery mathematical perfection in the night sky. Plato looks up at them and sees a promise that the universe is rational and that we can be too. But as the night deepens, we must leave this sanctuary of straight lines and clear answers. We must follow the road back into the city, past the tombs, back to the agora, where the shadows are long and the shapes are undefined. For in the heart of the city, there is no geometry. There is only a man, a dog, and a ceramic jar. The counter-argument to Plato's order is not a theory. It is a lifestyle. And it is waiting for us, curled up in the moonlight, ready to bark at the dawn. We leave the sacred silence of the academy now trading the soft earth of the olive grove for the hard-packed dirt and cobblestones of the city center. The camera of our imagination glides south, back into the heart of the beast, where the agora pulses with the chaotic, vibrant life of Athens. It is here, amidst the shouting fishmongers, the charcoal burners, and the politicians hurrying to the assembly, that Diogenes decides to build his own version of a fortress. But unlike Plato's walls of logic, Diogenes chooses a fortress of clay. He finds his home near the Metroon, the temple dedicated to the mother of the gods. It is a fittingly ironic location. The man who rejects all traditional family ties, sleeping in the shadow of the Divine Mother. But look closely at his residence. History often calls it a tub, bringing to mind a wooden basin for washing. But the reality is something far more grounded and earthen. It is a pythos, a massive ceramic jar, tall enough for a man to stand in, traditionally used to store grain, oil, or wine in the cool cellars of the wealthy. Diogenes has taken one of these storage vessels, perhaps cracked and discarded, and rolled it onto its side. Imagine the sensory experience of this choice. The clay is cool to the touch in the heat of the day, a shaded tunnel that amplifies the breeze. When the sun is high, the jar is an oven. When the rain falls, it is a drum. Diogenes crawls inside, his cloak bunched up as a pillow, his staff resting near the opening. To the citizens of Athens, passing by in their dyed wools and leather sandals, he looks like a dog in a kennel, a comparison he will eventually embrace with a toothy grin. But to Diogenes, looking out from the round aperture of his jar, the Athenians look like prisoners. They are trapped in their houses, trapped in their debts, trapped in their need to impress one another. He alone is free. He can rotate his house to face away from the cold north wind or toward the warming winter sun. He has solved the problem of real estate by realizing that the body takes up very little space and the soul takes up none at all. It is here, in the dust of the market, that he begins his process of shedding. If Plato is adding layers of education to the soul, Diogenes is peeling them away. He owns almost nothing. A cloak that doubles as a blanket, a staff for walking and defense, and a small wooden cup for drinking water from the public fountains. He believes he has reached the absolute minimum, the floor of existence. But the world has one more lesson for him, a lesson taught not by a philosopher, but by a child. One afternoon, the heat is sweltering. The cicadas are screaming in the pines, and the dust of the agora coats the back of the throat. Diogenes walks to the fountain house, the Enniakrunos, where the water spills from 9 spouts into a cool stone basin. He reaches into his satchel for his wooden cup. As he does, he sees a young boy running up to the water's edge. The boy does not have a satchel. He does not have a cup. He simply cups his small, dirty hands together, dips them into the flowing water, and drinks deeply, laughing as the cool liquid splashes over his face. Diogenes freezes. He looks at the boy, then at the wooden cup in his own hand, a cup he had carved, sanded, and carried for miles. He realizes, with a sudden jolting clarity, that he is still carrying unnecessary baggage. He is still relying on tools when nature has given him everything he needs. A child has beaten me in simplicity, he exclaims, his voice cracking with a mixture of shame and delight. He throws the cup onto the ground, shattering it against the stones. From that day on, he drinks from his hands. Later, he sees another child who has hollowed out a piece of bread to hold his lentil stew. Diogenes looks at his own spoon, his only other utensil. He throws the spoon away. He will eat with his bread crusts. He will eat with his fingers. Every object he discards feels like a weight lifted from his shoulders. He is becoming lighter, faster, more durable. Historians still argue whether these stories are literal events or parables invented by his followers to illustrate the extreme rigor of his philosophy. But the image of the man shattering his cup remains one of the most powerful symbols of the cynic life. It is a rejection of the technology of daily living. It asks us, how many things do we carry simply because we have forgotten we have hands? The Athenians, for their part, are baffled. Some mock him, whistling as they pass his jar, throwing bones as if he were truly a stray mongrel. But others stop and stare, unsettled by the realization that this man, who has nothing, seems happier than they are. He does not worry about shipwrecks destroying his cargo. He does not worry about thieves, for who would steal a broken jar or a pile of lentils? He does not worry about political exile, for he is already everywhere and nowhere. He calls himself a cosmopolite, a citizen of the world. It is the first time the word is used in this way. He belongs to the cosmos, to the order of nature, not to the order of the city-state. As the sun sets over the agora, painting the Parthenon in shades of violet and rose, Diogenes retreats into his pathos. The noise of the market dies down. The merchants pack away their stalls. The slaves finish their errands. The city locks its doors and bars its windows against the night. But Diogenes has no door to lock. He is open to the world. He listens to the wind whistling through the columns of the nearby temples. He watches the stray dogs, his brethren, curl up in the dust, twitching in their sleep as they chase imaginary rabbits. There is a profound, lullaby-like peace in this scene. Imagine the feeling of being that small, that contained. The curved walls of the jar hold the heat of the day, radiating a gentle warmth against his back. He is safe not because he has walls, but because he has nothing worth taking. He sleeps the deep, dreamless sleep of the exhausted, untroubled by the complex geometries of Plato or the anxieties of the wealthy. He is a seed inside a shell, waiting for the morning sun to crack him open again. In the distance, up the hill at the academy, Plato is perhaps lighting a lamp to write a new dialogue about the ideal state, worrying about the fragility of justice. Down here, in the ceramic womb, Diogenes is demonstrating that the ideal state is already available to anyone brave enough to crawl into a jar. The contrast is stark. The man who writes about the perfect city versus the man who lives perfectly in the imperfect one. And as the moon rises, silvering the edges of the Pythos, the city of Athens holds them both, the dreamer of the sky and the sleeper of the earth, suspended in the delicate balance of the night. Let the laughter of the previous section fade into a thoughtful silence as we return to the olive groves of the academy. The sun is higher now, filtering through the silver-green canopy in dappled pools of light. It is a morning of serious business. The air is still, save for the scratching of styluses on wax tablets and the low rhythmic voice of the master. Plato is walking among his students, his brow furrowed in concentration. They are engaged in a task that seems dry to us but was thrilling to them, the art of diaresis, or division. It is the process of defining the world by slicing it into smaller and smaller categories, like cutting a gem to reveal its true shape. The question on the floor is simple, yet profound. What is a human being? To answer this, Plato does not look at the people in the market or the soldiers on the walls. He looks inward to the logic of forms. He begins to divide. A human is an animal, clearly. But what kind? Not a water animal, but a land animal. Does it have 4 legs or 2? 2. So it is a biped. But birds are bipeds too. How do we distinguish a man from a stork? Ah, a man has no feathers. Therefore, the definition is complete. Man is a featherless biped. The students nod. It is elegant. It is clean. It fits into the geometric order of the academy. The definition feels like a sturdy little box in which humanity can be neatly packed and understood. There is a sense of satisfaction in the room, the comfort that comes when chaos is tamed by words. But outside the low wall of the school, there is a rustling. A different kind of logic is approaching. Diogenes has heard of this definition. Perhaps a student whispered it in the marketplace. Or perhaps the wind carried the self-satisfied murmur of the academy down to the city. To Diogenes, this definition is not a triumph of reason. It is a trap. It mistakes the label for the thing itself. It is a perfect example of how the mind can trick itself into thinking it knows something just because it has named it. And so, the cynic prepares his rebuttal. He does not write a treatise. He does not prepare a speech. He goes to a poulterer's stall, perhaps trading a few lentils or simply using his formidable beggar's charm, and acquires a chicken. What happens next is one of the most famous moments in the history of philosophy, a collision between the abstract and the visceral that still echoes today. Imagine the scene. The academy is quiet, the students absorbed in their mental maps. Suddenly, the gate bursts open. Diogenes strides in, his cloak swirling, his eyes bright with mischief. In his hands, he holds the unfortunate bird, which he has plucked clean of its feathers. The poor creature is naked, shivering, a pale, bumpy, ridiculous thing. Diogenes marches to the center of the lecture circle, lifts the bird high for all to see, and shouts, "Behold, I have brought you a man." The silence shatters. The chicken squawks, flapping its bare wings in a panic, kicking up dust. Feathers, or the lack of them, fly into the faces of the stunned philosophers. The elegant geometry of the morning collapses into absurdity. The featherless biped is not a noble philosopher king. It is a plucked chicken. There is laughter, of course, shocked, nervous laughter. But beneath the comedy, a devastating point has been landed. Diogenes has shown that words are not the world. You can build the most perfect definition, the most logical castle in the air. But reality, messy, unpredictable, featherless reality, can always crash through the door and make it look foolish. Plato, to his credit, does not have Diogenes thrown out. He does not scream. He looks at the chicken, then at Diogenes, and then at his students. He realizes that his definition, while logically sound, was practically vulnerable. He nods, perhaps with a tight, wry smile, acknowledging the hit. The story goes that he later added a correction to the definition. Man is a featherless biped, with broad, flat nails. It is a small, fussy addition, a patch on a leaking boat. But the damage is done. The spell of absolute certainty has been broken. Historians still argue whether this event truly happened, or if it was a later invention to illustrate the tension between the two schools. But the truth of the story lies not in the chicken, but in the friction. It captures the eternal struggle between the theorist and the realist. Plato represents the urge to classify, to organize, to make the world safe for the mind. Diogenes represents the urge to disrupt, to remind us that life is wilder than our boxes. As the commotion dies down and Diogenes leaves, likely taking the chicken with him for a stew, the atmosphere in the academy changes. The students return to their tablets, but the air is different. The definition of man now feels a little less solid, a little more provisional. They look at their own hands, their own broad flat nails, and wonder if they are truly defined by such things. This moment teaches us something gentle about our own need for control. We too try to define our lives. We say, I am a success because I have this job, or I am a good person because I follow these rules. We build definitions to feel safe, but Diogenes invites us to laugh at our own seriousness. He reminds us that we are all, in a sense, just featherless bipeds wandering through a mysterious world, and that no label can truly capture the miracle of being alive. The sun begins its descent now, casting long, stretching shadows across the academy grounds. The chicken incident becomes a whisper, then a legend. The dust settles on the wrestling ground. Plato retires to his study, perhaps rubbing his temples, realizing that the task of philosophy is harder than he thought. It is not just about building structures. It is about building structures that can withstand the weight of a living, breathing reality. And Diogenes? He returns to his jar, chuckling. He has not destroyed the academy, but he has ventilated it. He has opened a window to let the fresh air of absurdity in. As evening falls, the city of Athens seems to breathe a little easier, its rigid lines softened by the memory of a laugh. The tension between the two men is not a war, but a dance. One steps forward with a definition, the other steps back with a plucked bird. And in the space between them, the human mind learns to be both rigorous and humble. Let the image of the plucked chicken fade now, replaced by the soothing gray of twilight. The intellectual battle is over for the day. The mind can rest. We are not definitions to be solved. We are stories to be told. And as the stars begin to poke through the violet sky, we prepare to leave the realm of logic and enter a scene of power. A meeting between the beggar in the tub and the man who conquered the world. The narrative camera drifts south now, leaving the intellectual groves of Athens for the bustling, sensuous energy of Corinth. It is a different kind of city, wealthier, louder, a crossroads of trade where the smell of exotic spices mixes with the sweat of sailors and the perfume of courtesans. The year is roughly 336 BC. The air is thick with heat and anticipation. A new power has risen in the north, a golden storm sweeping down from Macedonia. His name is Alexander, and though he is only 20 years old, he already carries the weight of the world on his shoulders. He has just been appointed the supreme commander of the Greeks, the hegemon, ready to launch a war against the vast Persian Empire. Imagine the scene in the suburb of Cranion, a cypress grove just outside the city walls. The sun is blazing overhead, a relentless, white-hot Greek sun that bleaches the color from the stones and makes the cicadas scream in a deafening, rhythmic chorus. It is the kind of heat that slows time, making every movement feel heavy and deliberate. In the middle of this stillness lies Diogenes. He is an old man now, his skin tanned to the color of old leather, his hair thinned by the seasons. He is not teaching, he is not debating. He is simply lying on the ground, his limbs sprawled out, soaking up the warmth. He is engaged in the serious business of enjoying existence. To him, The sun is not just weather. It is a direct line to the divine fire of the universe, a free gift that requires no currency to purchase. Suddenly, the earth begins to tremble. It is not an earthquake, but the rhythmic thud of marching feet. The birds stop singing. A shadow falls across the grass, growing longer and darker. A crowd approaches, generals in gleaming breastplates, diplomats in fine robes, soldiers with plumed helmets, all jostling for position. At the center of this metallic swirl is Alexander. He is radiant, described by historians as having eyes that melted with moisture and a lion-like mane of hair. He smells of expensive oil, horse sweat, and the iron tang of weapons. He is the man who has everything. The procession stops. The silence that follows is heavy, charged with the friction between two absolute opposites. On one side stands the conqueror, the man who believes he can shape the world to his will. On the other lies the cynic, the man who believes the world is already perfect if you just leave it alone. Alexander steps forward. He is used to men bowing, trembling, begging for favors. He expects this ragged philosopher to leap up, to flatter him, to ask for gold or a governorship. But Diogenes does not move. He merely squints, raising a hand to shield his eyes, looking up at the young king as if he were a cloud passing over a mountain. Alexander, intrigued by this indifference, speaks first. His voice is trained for command, resonating through the grove. "I am Alexander the great king," he announces. Diogenes replies, his voice raspy from disuse. "And I am Diogenes the dog." There is a pause. The courtiers gasp. To call oneself a dog is to claim the lowest status, yet Diogenes wears the title like a crown. Alexander, sensing a peer in spirit, if not in station, presses further. He wants to give a gift. He wants to prove that his power can reach even the lowest wretch. "Ask of me whatever you wish," Alexander says, his gesture sweeping across the horizon, implying that he can deliver cities, treasures, or titles. Diogenes shifts slightly on the hard ground. He looks at the king's expensive sandals, his shining greaves, the vast machinery of empire standing behind him. Then he looks up at the sky, which has been blocked by the king's silhouette. "Stand a little out of my sun," Diogenes says. The shock ripples through the crowd like a physical blow. The soldiers reach for their sword hilts. The diplomats turn pale. It is an insult of the highest order. The most powerful man on earth has offered the world, and the beggar has asked him to move because he is blocking the light. But look at Alexander's face. He does not rage. He does not signal for an execution. A slow smile spreads across his features. He realizes the magnitude of what has just happened. In asking for nothing, Diogenes has shown that he is richer than the king. Alexander needs armies, supply lines, gold, and adulation to maintain his happiness. Diogenes needs only the sun, and Alexander cannot even give him that. He can only take it away. Alexander laughs, a genuine startled laugh. He turns to his entourage, who are waiting for the order to strike the old man down. But truly, he says, if I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes. It is a confession of profound envy. The king admits that he is a prisoner of his own ambition. He must conquer Persia. He must march to India. He must never stop. For the moment he stops, he is just a man. Diogenes has already stopped. He has arrived at the destination Alexander is chasing, total self-sufficiency, without taking a single step. Historians still argue whether this encounter is fact or fiction. Did the two most famous men of the century really meet in a Corinthian ditch? Or is it a moral fable invented to show the limits of worldly power? But as a story to fall asleep to, the truth of the geography matters less than the truth of the psychology. It is the moment when the fever of doing meets the cool water of being. Alexander marches away, his armor clanking, his dust cloud rising to choke the air. He is walking toward glory, toward Babylon, toward an early death. The noise fades. The vibration in the crown stops. Diogenes is left alone again. The shadow lifts. The warm golden light returns to his face. He closes his eyes, breathing in the scent of the heated cypress needles. He has not conquered the world. He has simply let it pass him by. There is a deep, resonant peace in this image. We often feel like Alexander, driven by lists of tasks, by the need to acquire, to improve, to be recognized. We feel that if we just get that promotion, that house, that relationship, we will finally be happy. But Diogenes in the sunlight whispers a different possibility, that the things we need most are already here, free and unearned. The sun does not charge a fee. The air does not ask for a resume. As the afternoon wears on in Corinth, the light softens, turning from white to a honeyed gold. The tension of the encounter dissolves into the atmosphere. The dog sleeps, his chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm with the earth. He has won the day simply by refusing to play the game. And somewhere on the road north, the young king rides on, perhaps glancing back at the sun setting over the hills, wondering if the beggar in the ditch knows a secret that all his tutors and generals have missed. Let this scene settle in your mind like a warm stone. You do not need to be Alexander tonight. You do not need to conquer anything. You can simply be. The sun has set for you too, and the darkness is a different kind of gift, a blanket that asks nothing of you but to rest. We leave Corinth now, suspended in that golden hour, and drift back towards the realm of the mind, where Plato is constructing a city not of stone, but of words, a republic where the sun is not just a star, but a symbol of the ultimate good. The heat of the day has finally broken. We drift away from the blinding sun of Corinth, moving north again, back through the darkening olive groves, back to the port of Athens, the Piraeus. It is night here, a night that stretches out long and deep, filled with the murmur of voices and the smell of the sea. We are entering the setting of Plato's masterpiece, the Republic. It is around 375 BC, and in a quiet house near the harbor, a conversation is taking place that will echo for millennia. Imagine the scene. A group of men reclining on couches after a festival, the oil lamps burning low, casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. Outside, the torch races have ended, and the city sleeps. But inside, the mind is wide awake. Socrates is there, or at least Plato's memory of him, serving as the guide. Alongside him are Plato's own brothers, Glaucon and Adimantus, young, eager, aristocrats with the fire of ambition in their eyes. They are asking the ultimate question: is it better to be just than unjust? To answer them, Plato does not look at the messy, corrupt Athens outside the window. He decides to build a new city, not of stone and timber, but of words. Come, he seems to whisper through the centuries. Let us watch a city coming into being in speech. Close your eyes and watch it rise. It is a city of invisible lines, a Callipolis, the beautiful city. In this dream, there are no chaotic markets, no shouting mobs, no confused juries. Everything has a place. It is a city designed like a human body, or perhaps a musical instrument, perfectly tuned. At the bottom, forming the strong legs and belly of the city, are the producers, the farmers, the craftsmen, the merchants. They are driven by appetite, by the love of gain, and the comforts of life. But in Plato's city, their hunger is not a vice. It is the engine of survival, kept in check by moderation. They provide the bread, the shoes, the walls. They are the bronze and iron of the state. Above them, forming the chest and the heart, are the auxiliaries, the warriors. These are the guardians of the city, spirited and fierce. They are like noble dogs, gentle to their friends and terrible to their enemies. They do not own gold. Their gold is in their souls. They live together, eat together, and know no private property, for ownership divides the heart. They are the silver class, driven not by money, but by honor and courage. And at the very top, the head of the city, sit the rulers. These are not tyrants who seized power, nor politicians who begged for votes. They are the philosopher kings. They are the gold. They have spent 50 years studying mathematics, dialectic, and the nature of the good. They do not want to rule. In fact, they would rather stay in the realm of pure thought. But they rule out of necessity, descending from their heights to guide the city, just as a captain steers a ship. This is Plato's great vision, a world where power and wisdom are finally fused. Until philosophers become kings, he writes, or those now called kings effectively and adequately philosophize, there will be no rest from troubles. It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? A place where competence reigns. A place where the doctor heals because he knows medicine, not because he is popular. A place where the ruler rules because he knows justice, not because he is rich. It is a lullaby of perfect order. But look closer at the shadows of this city. To maintain this harmony, Plato realizes he must control everything. The poets, those messy, emotional storytellers who stir up fear and lust, must be censored or exiled. The music must be regulated. No soft, mournful modes that make men weak, only the sturdy Dorian and Phrygian rhythms that encourage bravery. Even the family must be dissolved among the guardians. Children are raised in common, so that every child is everyone's child, and no private loyalty can tear the fabric of the state. Historians still argue whether Plato meant this city to be a blueprint for a real government, or if it was an elaborate metaphor for the human soul. For the city is just the soul writ large. The producers are our appetites, the part of us that wants cake, sex, and sleep. The auxiliaries are our spirit, the part that gets angry at injustice, that feels shame and pride. And the ruler is our reason, the tiny divine spark that calculates, plans, and looks at the stars. When these three parts agree, when reason guides spirit to control appetite, we have justice. We have internal peace. We are no longer torn apart by conflicting desires. We are whole. This is the seductive power of Plato's dream. We all know the feeling of inner civil war, when we know what is good for us, but do what is bad, when we want to be brave, but feel fear. Plato offers a truce. He offers a way to organize the chaos inside us. He whispers that if we just let the best part of us rule, we will be happy. We will be like a well-ordered city, safe from the tyranny of our own moods. As the night deepens in the Piraeus, the dialogue winds down. The imaginary city stands complete in the mind's eye, gleaming, white, symmetrical. It is a crystalline structure, beautiful and cold. It is a monument to the human longing for control. It promises that if we can just be smart enough, disciplined enough, we can fix the human condition. But there is a silence after the word stop. The young men, Glaucon and Adimantus, are quiet, perhaps overwhelmed by the grandeur of the vision. The oil lamps are sputtering out. The real world is waiting outside, the world of mud, of laughter, of unpredictability. And this is where the unease creeps in. A city without poets, a city where love is regulated, a city where truth is handed down from the top. It feels safe, yes. But does it feel alive? Plato's genius was to see the danger of chaos. His tragedy, perhaps, was to fear it so much that he tried to eliminate the very friction that makes life move. He wanted a statue that could breathe. He wanted a song that never changed key. Let the image of the Callipolis fade now. Let the white walls dissolve into mist. We are left with the feeling of the dream, the deep, satisfying desire for things to make sense. It is a comfort to think that somewhere in the realm of forms there is a perfect justice that never fails. It is a pillow for the weary mind. But as we leave the house in the Piraeus and step back out into the cool, dark streets of Athens, we remember that we are not made of gold, silver, and bronze. We are flesh and blood. And while Plato dreams of invisible lines and perfect kings, another figure is waking up with the dawn, ready to challenge this entire architectural masterpiece with a single absurd gesture. The sun rises over the real city, washing away the theoretical one. The market opens, the noise returns, and there, shuffling through the crowd, is Diogenes. He is not building a city in the sky. He is looking for something much harder to find on earth. He lights a lantern, though it is broad daylight. The flame flickers weakly against the brilliance of the sun, a tiny, defiant spark of inquiry. He holds it up to the faces of the passers-by, the merchants, the soldiers, the students of the academy. He is beginning his famous search. What is he looking for? Not a philosopher king, not a perfect definition. He is looking for a human being. And the lantern, bobbing in the daylight, signals that the search for simple honesty might be the most difficult quest of all. The sun is now at its zenith, a blinding white disk hanging directly over the agora. The heat radiates off the cobblestones in shimmering waves, distorting the air like a mirage. It is the busiest hour of the day. The market is a cacophony of commerce. The sharp slap of fish onto marble slabs, the haggling over amphorae of oil, the clinking of coins, the braying of donkeys laden with charcoal. Athens is awake, aggressive, and alive with the business of survival. Into this bright, chaotic swirl steps Diogenes. He is a jarring sight, as always, a ragged figure in a sea of tunics, dyed in saffron and indigo. But today, he is doing something that makes even the most jaded Athenians stop and stare. In one hand, he grips his staff. In the other, he holds a lit lantern. Imagine the absurdity of the image. The Aegean sun is blazing with such intensity that it bleaches the color from the statues of the gods. Shadows are short and sharp. Visibility is perfect. Yet here is a man shuffling through the crowd, shielding a tiny flickering flame with his hand, as if he were navigating a pitch-black dungeon. He lifts the lantern high, thrusting it into the faces of passers-by, startling a wealthy merchant, peering closely at a flushed politician, examining a group of laughing youths. "What are you doing, you old fool?" someone finally shouts, the laughter rippling through the crowd. "Have you gone blind? Can you not see the sun?" Diogenes does not smile. He does not blink. He looks at them with a gaze that is both piercing and incredibly weary. He lifts the lantern again, illuminating the face of a bewildered citizen, then shakes his head and moves on. "I am looking for a human being," he rasps. The translation has softened over the centuries. We often hear it as, "I am looking for an honest man." But the Greek is starker. Anthropos, a human, a man. He is looking for a single person who lives according to their true nature, stripped of the masks of society. To the crowd, it is a joke. "Here we are," they might shout, gesturing to themselves. "We are men. We are Athenians." But Diogenes sees differently. He sees the merchant and sees only greed wearing a tunic. He sees the politician and sees only ambition wearing a smile. He sees the general and sees only fear disguised as courage. Everyone he looks at is playing a role. They are featherless bipeds, yes, but they are not human. They are actors in a play they didn't write, reciting lines they don't understand, chasing desires that aren't their own. He walks past the stalls of the bankers, men like his father once was, and sees them enslaved by their own ledgers. He walks past the gymnasium, where young men oil their bodies, and sees them enslaved by vanity. He is searching for someone who is simply themselves, someone who has not bartered their soul for a little bit of comfort or reputation. And in the bustling, wealthy, powerful city of Athens, he cannot find one. The lantern bobbing in the daylight is a devastating critique. It suggests that our enlightened society is actually a kind of darkness. We think we see everything because the sun is up. We see the prices, the ranks, the rules. But Diogenes argues, we are spiritually blind. We have forgotten what a human being actually is. Is a human a thing that hoards gold? Is a human a thing that worries about what the neighbors think? Or is a human something wilder, simpler, and more free? Historians still argue about the nuances of this performance. Was it a specific attack on Plato's definitions, or a general condemnation of Athenian hypocrisy? Regardless, the image of the lantern has burned itself into the Western imagination. It is the ultimate symbol of skepticism. It asks us to look at our own lives and ask, am I being human right now? Or am I just playing a part? As Diogenes moves through the crowd, the reaction shifts from amusement to unease. Being looked at by Diogenes is like being looked at by an X-ray. He sees the bones of your character. He sees the lies you tell yourself to get out of bed in the morning. People begin to turn away to avoid his gaze. The lantern becomes a spotlight no one wants to step into. Finally, the day begins to wane. The sun dips toward the mountains of the Peloponnese, turning the sky a bruised purple. The flame in Diogenes' lantern, once invisible against the daylight, now begins to glow brighter as the shadows lengthen. He has found no one. He blows out the light with a sharp breath. The thin trail of smoke drifts up, mingling with the smells of roasting meat and dust. He returns to his jar, tossing the lantern aside. He does not seem angry, only resigned. He sits and watches the Athenians hurry home, locking their doors, lighting their own lamps against the coming night. They are afraid of the dark. Diogenes is not. He knows that the real darkness is inside, and no amount of olive oil can burn it away. There is a strange, paradoxical comfort in this story. It reminds us that the feeling of being fake or lost in a crowd is ancient. We are not the first people to feel that society is a masquerade. Diogenes felt it too, and by making a joke of it, by carrying his lamp in the sun, he gives us permission to stop pretending, even for a moment. As the noise of the agora fades into the evening murmur, we leave the cynic to his rest. But the theme of light and shadow, of seeing and blindness does not end here. It travels back up the road to the academy, where Plato is taking the very same idea, that most people are living in a shadowy illusion, and turning it into the most famous story in all of philosophy. Diogenes used a lantern to show us we are blind. Plato will use a cave. Close your eyes deeper now. Let the market sounds vanish completely. Imagine you are descending underground, away from the sun, away from the jar, into a cool, damp cavern where the only reality is a flicker on a wall. The transition is smooth, from the blinding light of the cynic's midday satire to the haunting, flickering firelight of the Platonist's greatest myth. Leave the open sky of Athens behind now. Let the memory of the sun-drenched market fade, and imagine yourself descending into the cool, quiet earth. The air grows heavy and damp, smelling of limestone and ancient dust. The sounds of the city are muffled by thick walls of rock until there is only silence, a deep, resonant silence that presses against your ears. We are entering the most famous dream in the history of philosophy, a story Plato told to explain why it is so hard for us to see the truth. It is the allegory of the cave. Imagine a cavern deep underground. Here, a row of prisoners has been chained since childhood. Their legs and necks are fixed so they cannot move, cannot turn their heads. They can only stare straight ahead at the rough blank wall of the cave. Behind them, high up and out of sight, a fire is burning. Between the fire and the prisoners runs a raised path, like a stage, where people walk carrying objects. Statues of men, figures of animals, tools of stone and wood. The light of the fire catches these objects and casts their long, wavering shadows onto the wall in front of the prisoners. To these bound men, the shadows are the only reality they have ever known. They see a dark shape move and say, "That is a horse." They see a jagged silhouette and say, "That is a tree." They hear the echoes of the carriers' voices bouncing off the stone and believe the shadows themselves are speaking. They award prizes to the one who can predict which shadow will come next. They take pride in their knowledge of this dark, two-dimensional world. They do not know they are prisoners. They think this is simply the world. But then, Plato whispers, imagine that one prisoner is freed. Perhaps a teacher comes, someone like Socrates, and unshackles him. He is told to stand up. His limbs are stiff. The movement is agony. He is forced to turn around. For the first time, he looks directly at the fire. The light sears his eyes, which are used only to the dim gray of the wall. He is blinded, confused, and terrified. He wants to turn back to the shadows he understands. They were safe. This new brightness is pain. But the guide does not let him retreat. He drags the prisoner up the rough, steep ascent, out of the cave and into the sunlight. The shock is total. The prisoner is now fully blinded. The sun is millions of times brighter than the cave fire. He falls to his knees, covering his face. At first, he can only look at the shadows of things on the ground, or their reflections in pools of water. Slowly, his eyes adjust. He sees a real tree, green and trembling in the wind, and realizes the shadow in the cave was just a dead grey copy. He sees a real bird, bursting with color, and realizes the silhouette on the wall was a lie. Finally, he looks up at the sun itself, the source of all light, all warmth, all seasons. He understands now. The cave was a prison of illusion. The prizes they gave each other for naming shadows were meaningless. He is filled with pity for his fellow prisoners still sitting in the dark, arguing over nothing. Historians and philosophers still argue about the layers of this story? Is it a political warning about how mass culture blinds us? Is it a religious vision of the soul's ascent to God? Or is it simply about education, the painful process of learning that the world is bigger than we thought? Whatever the interpretation, the emotional core is the same. The truth is blinding, and leaving our comfort zone is the hardest thing a human being can do. But the story has a darker, more tragic ending. The freed man does not stay in the sunlight. He remembers his friends. He feels a duty to go back down and tell them the truth. He descends again into the gloom. But now, his eyes are used to the sun. He stumbles in the dark. He cannot see the shadows as clearly as the others anymore. He looks clumsy, foolish. When he tells the prisoners, "You are looking at illusions. There is a real world above." They laugh at him. They say his journey has ruined his eyes. They say that going up is dangerous. And Plato warns in a line that foreshadows the death of Socrates. If he tries to free them and lead them up, they will kill him. They love their chains because the chains are familiar. They fear the light because the light requires them to change. This is the melancholy heart of Plato's philosophy. He believes that most of us are asleep, dreaming we are awake. We obsess over money, fame, and status, shadows on a wall, while the real things, the eternal truths of justice and goodness, wait for us outside, ignored. It is a lonely vision. To be a philosopher for Plato is to be the one man in the theater who sees the wires holding up the scenery. Yet there is a strange comfort here too. It validates that feeling we all have in quiet moments, that there must be more to life than this daily grind. That feeling is not madness. It is the memory of the sun. It is the soul remembering where it belongs. As the image of the cave fades, replaced by the soft, comforting darkness of your own room, let the tension of the allegory dissolve. You do not need to climb the steep path tonight. You do not need to face the blinding sun. It is enough to know that the shadows are just shadows. The anxieties that dance on the wall of your mind, the worries about tomorrow, the regrets about yesterday. They are not the solid reality. They are just flickering shapes. You can let them pass. We leave the cave now, ascending not into the harsh glare of the sun, but into the gentle, ordinary daylight of a kitchen. We are leaving the high drama of Plato's metaphysics for a scene of humble, earthy simplicity. While Plato worries about how to drag humanity to the light, Diogenes is solving a much more immediate problem: lunch. The transition is sharp but cleansing. We go from the intellectual struggle of the soul to the physical satisfaction of the belly. We go from a story about the danger of shadows to a story about the danger of luxury. The camera moves to a dusty street corner where the old cynic sits, stirring a pot of lentils. The smell is savory, simple, and real. It is the smell of freedom, and it is about to clash with the perfume of the court. The smell of boiling lentils is distinct, earthy, humble, and thick with the promise of sustenance. It is not the aroma of a feast. It does not carry the sweet, intoxicating scent of roasting lamb or the sharp tang of spiced wine that would waft from the banquet halls of the wealthy. It is the smell of survival. It hangs now in the warm air of a quiet Athenian street corner, where Diogenes sits on the ground, his back against a sun-warmed wall, stirring a small pot over a modest fire. This is the scene of one of the most devastatingly simple lessons in the history of ethics. Diogenes is washing his vegetables. He is preparing a meal that cost him almost nothing, perhaps a few copper coins, or perhaps the lentils were a gift from a sympathetic admirer. He is focused, content. His movements are slow and deliberate. There is a quiet dignity in the way he handles the wooden spoon, the way he tastes the broth, adding a pinch of salt. He is a man who knows exactly what he needs to stay alive, and he has it right there in the pot. As he cooks, a shadow falls across his meal. It is a long, elegant shadow, cast by a man wearing robes of dyed Tyrian purple, the color of royalty and immense wealth. The newcomer is Aristippus. History remembers Aristippus as another student of Socrates, but one who took a path diverging sharply from both Plato and Diogenes. While Plato sought truth in the heavens, and Diogenes sought freedom in the gutter, Aristippus sought pleasure in the palaces. He was the founder of the Cyrenaic school, a philosophy of hedonism that argued the goal of life was smooth, gentle motion, pleasure. He was famous for his wit, his adaptability, and his unapologetic love of luxury. He lived at the court of Dionysius, the tyrant of Syracuse, where he ate the finest foods, wore the softest wools, and navigated the treacherous currents of a dictator's favor with a smile. Aristippus looks down at the old cynic, scrubbing his cheap lentils in the dirt. He feels a mixture of pity and amusement. To him, Diogenes is a wasted intellect, a brilliant man who has chosen to live like a beggar when he could be living like a prince. Diogenes, Aristippus says, his voice smooth and cultured, if you had only learned to flatter King Dionysius, you would not have to be washing lentils. It is a comment meant to be helpful, in a patronizing way. It is the advice of the pragmatist to the idealist. Compromise a little. Play the game. You are too smart to be this poor. Diogenes does not look up immediately. He continues to stir his pot, watching the steam rise into the blue sky. He takes a moment to chew on the thought, just as he will chew on his humble meal. Then he stops. He lifts his head and looks Aristippus in the eye, his gaze clear and unblinking. And you, Aristippus, he replies, his voice raspy but cutting through the street noise like a knife. If you had only learned to live on lentils, you would not have to flatter King Dionysius. The silence that follows is heavier than the heat of the day. In one sentence, the entire structure of worldly ambition collapses. Aristippus thinks he is free because he has money and access to power. But Diogenes reveals that Aristippus is actually a slave to his own expensive tastes. Because he needs the purple robes and the roasted lamb, he must bow to the tyrant. He must laugh at the king's bad jokes. He must bite his tongue when the king is cruel. His luxury is a golden chain. Diogenes, on the other hand, needs nothing but his lentils. Because his desires are so small, no man can own him. He can speak the truth to anyone, even a king, because he has nothing to lose. If the king gets angry and takes away his fortune, he has none. If the king exiles him, he is already homeless. Historians still argue about the nuances of this encounter. Some say it happened while washing vegetables, others say it was while eating dried figs. But the core truth remains vibrant. It is the clash between freedom to and freedom from. Aristippus has the freedom to buy what he wants. Diogenes has the freedom from wanting anything at all. There is a profound, lulling comfort in this realization. We often spend our days like Aristippus, hustling and worrying, trying to please bosses or clients or social circles. terrified of losing our standing. We convince ourselves that we need the new car, the bigger house, the approval of strangers. But Diogenes whispers from his street corner that the cost of these things is high. The cost is our independence. The cost is our voice. Imagine the relief of realizing you don't need the banquet. Imagine the quiet satisfaction of a bowl of warm soup eaten in the sun, knowing you owe nothing to anyone. It is a flavor sweeter than the rarest wine. Aristippus, for his part, lightly smiled a tight, uncomfortable smile and walked away. He was too fond of his comforts to change. He returned to the palace, to the soft cushions and the dangerous intrigues of the court. He remained a brilliant, witty prisoner of his own appetites. But Diogenes stays. He finishes his meal. He scrapes the bowl clean. He leans back against the warm stone wall and closes his eyes, digesting not just his food, but his freedom. The noise of the city flows around him, the shouts of merchants, the rattle of carts, but it does not touch him. He is the king of his own small kingdom, ruled by the simple laws of nature. This story of the lentils is a kind of lullaby for the anxious heart. It tells us that we are safer than we think. If the worst happens, if we lose the job, the status, the money, we can still wash our lentils. We can still feel the sun. We can still be free. The bottom of the social ladder is not a pit. It is a solid foundation. As the afternoon wears on, the light changes, softening into the golden hour. The sharp shadows of noon stretch out, becoming gentle and hazy. We leave Diogenes to his nap, his belly full, his mind at peace. But the mention of King Dionysius in their conversation is not accidental. It is a foreshadowing. For while Diogenes mocked the idea of serving a tyrant, his great rival Plato was about to make the mistake of trying to teach one. The narrative shifts now from the safety of poverty to the danger of high politics. We must leave the dusty street corner and board a ship. We are going to travel west, across the wine-dark sea, to the island of Sicily. There, in the powerful city of Syracuse, Plato will try to turn his dream of the philosopher king into reality. He will try to mold a young tyrant into a wise ruler. It is a journey of immense hope and terrible risk. The sea is calm as we set out, the waves lapping rhythmically against the hull. But the destination is a city of spies, secret police, and volatile tempers. Plato is leaving the realm of ideas for the realm of power. And he is about to learn that not every soul can be shaped like clay. Relax now. Let the motion of the imaginary boat rock you gently. The smell of lentils fades, replaced by the salty, bracing air of the open ocean. We are sailing toward the setting sun, toward a lesson on the limits of philosophy, and the perilous difference between writing about a king and standing in front of one. The gentle rocking of the imagination settles now as the wooden hull scrapes against the stone quay of the great harbor of Syracuse. We have left the austere, sun-bleached simplicity of Greece behind. We are in Sicily, the wild west of the ancient Mediterranean, a land of colossal temples, active volcanoes, and tyrants whose wealth is measured in mountains of gold and oceans of blood. The year is approximately 367 BC, and Plato, now a man of 60, has stepped off the ship not as a tourist, but as a desperate architect of the soul. He has come to the court of Dionysius II, the young absolute ruler of the most powerful city-state in the West. It is a place that glitters with danger. Imagine a fortress palace on the island of Ortygia, surrounded by high walls and deep moats, guarded by foreign mercenaries who speak a dozen different tongues. The air here smells of expensive perfume, masking the scent of fear. In Athens, men argued in the open market. Here, they whisper in corridors, their eyes darting to the shadows, terrified of the tyrant spies who are said to be everywhere. Plato has been invited by Dion, the young king's uncle and a devoted student of the academy, to attempt the impossible, to turn a spoiled, insecure dictator into a philosopher king. It is the ultimate test of the theory. If the Republic is true, if justice really is the health of the soul, then surely, with enough education, even a tyrant can be cured. The experiment begins with a strange and beautiful mania. For a few brief months, the palace of Syracuse is transformed. The polished marble floors, usually reserved for dancing and drinking parties, are covered in a fine layer of sand. Why? To draw geometric figures. Plato believes that before a ruler can understand justice, he must understand order, and the purest order is mathematics. Imagine the scene. The young king, Dionysius, kneeling on the floor in his royal robes, surrounded by courtiers who are feigning interest, all of them tracing triangles and circles in the dust. The halls of power, once echoing with the sounds of revelry, now hum with the quiet murmur of theorems. It seems for a fragile moment that the dream is working. The ship of fools, Plato's famous metaphor for a state run by a mutinous, ignorant crew, seems to be finding a captain who knows the stars. But the soul of a tyrant is a slippery thing. Dionysius is not a blank slate. He is a knot of anxieties. He wants to be wise, yes, but he wants to be flattered more. He finds the discipline of geometry tedious. The axioms do not bow to him. The triangles do not change their shape when he commands it. He begins to resent the old philosopher who looks at him not with fear, but with a critical, teacherly disappointment. The whispers begin. The other courtiers, jealous of Plato's influence and terrified of losing their own positions, start to pour poison into the king's ear. Plato is not teaching you, they hiss. He is weakening you. He wants to turn you into a dreamer so that Dion can seize the throne. The atmosphere shifts. The sand is swept away from the floors. The geometry lessons stop. The wine flows again. Plato finds himself no longer an honored guest, but a prisoner in a gilded cage. He is moved to the palace grounds, forbidden to leave, watched day and night. The philosopher-king experiment collapses into a hostage situation. Historians still argue about why Plato went. Was it arrogance? Was it a naive hope that reason could conquer power? Or was it a sense of duty, that he could not write about justice in the safety of his academy without trying at least once to practice it in the fire of the real world? There is a terrifying intimacy to this failure. It is the realization that you cannot force someone to see the light. You can drag a man out of the cave, but you cannot make him keep his eyes open. Dionysius loves the shadows. They are safer. They hide his insecurities. He eventually banishes Dion and keeps Plato as a kind of intellectual pet, a trophy of his own culture. Until finally, after tense negotiations and threats, the philosopher is allowed to board a ship back to Athens. The journey home is a somber one. The sea is grey and choppy. As Plato watches the coast of Sicily recede, the fortress of Ortygia turning into a speck on the horizon, he must confront the limits of his own vision. He has seen the face of tyranny up close, and it was not a monster to be slain, but a frightened child who refused to grow up. The Republic remains a book. Syracuse remains a dictatorship. The metaphor of the ship of fools haunts him. In the Republic, he described a ship where the captain is strong but deaf and nearsighted, and the crew are fighting each other for control, drugging the captain with wine, steering the boat toward rocks, while praising themselves as navigators. Plato had hoped to be the true pilot, the one who knows the winds and the stars. Instead, he was nearly thrown overboard. But there is a strange peace in this defeat. It clarifies things. Plato returns to the academy with a renewed appreciation for the quiet, slow work of education. He realizes that you cannot fix the world from the top down in a single generation. You have to build it from the bottom up, soul by soul, student by student. The failure in Syracuse protects the sanctity of the school. It proves that wisdom cannot be bought, seized, or commanded. It must be chosen. As the ship cuts through the waves, carrying the old man back to his olive grove, let the tension of the court dissolve. The spies are gone. The whispers are silenced by the wind. The complicated, dangerous game of politics fades away. We are returning to the realm of the simpler, the starker, the more honest. While Plato was dining with tyrants and drawing in the sand, his counterpart Diogenes was deepening his own philosophy, but in a very different direction. He was not interested in kings. He was interested in dogs. The transition from the high seas to the dusty ground is grounding. We leave the ship and find ourselves back on the solid earth, but not in Athens. We drift in memory to the place where the Cynic philosophy found its name and its nature. We go to the gymnasium of Cynosarges, the place of the white dog. It is here that the next chapter of our lullaby begins. It is a story not of failing to rule a city, but of succeeding in ruling oneself. It involves no gold, no armies, and no geometry. It involves only a pack of stray animals and the man who learned to bark with them. The night is calm now. The storm of Syracuse has passed. The ship has docked safely in your mind. You are safe. The ambition of the tyrant cannot reach you here. There is only the sound of the wind in the trees and the soft, rhythmic breathing of a sleeping world, waiting to learn what the dogs know that the philosophers missed. Let the heavy, gold-plated doors of the tyrant's palace close in your mind. We are done with marble floors and the hushed whispers of courtiers. We return to the dust. We return to the open air. We return to the creature that became the mascot of a revolution, the dog. It is here, in the winding, narrow alleys of Athens and the sun-baked exercise grounds outside the walls, that we find the true heart of Diogenes' philosophy. To understand him, we must understand the insult that became his title. The word cynic comes from the Greek kynikos, meaning dog-like. It was meant to be a slur. To call a man a dog was to call him shameless, dirty, a scavenger who performed private acts in public. It was a word used to strip a man of his dignity. But when the people of Athens pointed at Diogenes and barked the word dog, he did not recoil. He did not argue. He smiled. He looked at the stray mongrels trotting through the marketplace, creatures of instinct, survival, and absolute honesty, and he saw in them a wisdom that the philosophers of the academy had missed. "I'm a dog," he agreed, "for I fawn on those who give me anything. I yelp at those who refuse, and I set my teeth in rascals." Travel in your mind to the Cynosarges. This was a gymnasium just outside the city walls, dedicated to Heracles, the hero who wrestled lions and cleaned stables. But it was also the place for nautoi, the bastards, the illegitimate children of Athenian citizens and foreign mothers. It was a place for outsiders. Its name, Cynosarges, means white dog, tied to an ancient legend of a dog snatching a sacrificial victim. It is here that Antisthenes taught, and here that Diogenes found his spiritual pack. Imagine the atmosphere of this place. It is not the quiet, elite grove of Plato's academy. It is louder, rougher. It smells of sweat and oil. The men here are not training to rule the city. They are training to endure it. And wandering among the wrestlers and the boxers are the dogs themselves, lean, scarred, golden-eyed animals that sleep in the shade of the porticos and snap at flies in the heat. Diogenes watches them. He studies them with the intensity of a scientist. He realizes that the dog is the perfect philosopher of nature. Consider the dog's life. It eats when it is hungry, and it enjoys the food intensely, whether it is a bone or a scrap of meat. It sleeps when it is tired, curling up anywhere the ground is flat. It has no shame about its body. It does not worry about whether its fur is the right color or if it is popular with the other dogs. It lives entirely in the present tense. To Diogenes, this is ataraxia, freedom from anxiety. The dog does not have a mortgage. The dog does not have a reputation to maintain. The dog does not fear the gods or the future. It is simply, perfectly, itself. Historians still argue whether the name cynic came first from the gymnasium or the insult, but the symbolism is undeniable. The dog became the emblem of the movement. Diogenes believed that human beings had complicated their lives with custom, nomos, arbitrary rules about what to wear, how to eat, whom to marry, and how to speak. These rules, he argued, were chains. The dog lived by physis, nature, and nature, he believed, was always right. There is a famous story, perhaps a legend, perhaps a memory, of Diogenes observing a dog at a feast. The guests were throwing bones to the animal, laughing at its greed. Diogenes watched the dog crack the bone, extract the marrow, and trot away, tail wagging, completely satisfied. Then he watched the guests, drunk and arguing, worried about their status, envious of each other's clothes, unable to enjoy the banquet because they were too busy performing for one another. Who, he asked, is the real animal? The one who is content with a bone, or the one who is never satisfied with a kingdom? He began to mimic the dog's virtues. He trained himself to be tough. He walked barefoot in the snow to harden his feet. He rolled in the hot sand in summer to harden his skin. This was not masochism. It was ascesis, or training. Just as an athlete trains for the Olympics, the cynic trains for life. He wanted to be able to be happy anywhere, in any weather, under any circumstances. If he could be happy in a storm, then the storm could not hurt him. If he could be happy with water, then poverty could not hurt him. He was building an invincible fortress inside his own skin. There is a gentleness to this ruggedness. It is the gentleness of self-acceptance. Diogenes taught that we should not be ashamed of our natural functions. Everyone eats. Everyone sleeps. Everyone has a body. Why hide it? Why pretend we are angels when we are, in fact, mammals? By rejecting shame, he rejected the power of society to hurt him. You cannot embarrass a man who has nothing to hide. As the sun sets over the cynosarges, the training ground empties. The athletes go home to their families. The philosophers go back to their books. But Diogenes stays. He finds a spot near the temple of Heracles, perhaps sharing a patch of dry earth with a stray dog he has befriended. He strokes the animal's rough fur. The dog sighs, a long exhalation of pure relaxation, and closes its eyes. Diogenes does the same. In this moment, The barrier between man and beast dissolves. There is only the breathing of two living things in the dark. It is a lullaby of the wild. It tells us that we are enough just as we are. We do not need to be smarter, richer, or more polite to deserve a place on the earth. The earth is already ours. The grass does not judge us. The wind does not ask for our credentials. This canine wisdom is the anchor of Diogenes' peace. But while he sleeps, the untroubled sleep of the dog, his rival Plato is awake in the academy, wrestling with a very different vision of the human condition. To Plato, the human soul is not a simple, unified thing like a dog. It is a battlefield. It is a complicated, dangerous, and beautiful mess that requires constant vigilance. We leave the peaceful, dusty ground of the cynosages now. We leave the sleeping dogs and the simple life. We must ascend again, up into the high, thin air of metaphysics. We are going to look inside the human mind, as Plato saw it, not as a single creature, but as a chariot race happening in the sky. The transition is from the ground to the clouds, from the belly to the spirit. Prepare yourself for a vision of struggle and ascent. The soul is about to take flight, and the reins are in your hands. The dust of the gymnasium settles. We leave the rhythmic breathing of Diogenes and his dogs in the shadow of the temple, and let our minds lift, drifting upward like smoke from a dying fire. We are leaving the earth behind now, rising into the thin, clear air of the imagination. We are traveling to a quiet riverbank outside the walls of Athens, to a spot where the plane trees cast a wide, cooling shade over the grass, and the cicadas hum a hypnotic midday song. It is here, in the dialogue known as the Phaedrus, that Plato paints his most vivid, terrifying, and beautiful picture of what it means to be human. He does not see us as simple creatures like the dog. He sees us as a desperate, thundering struggle in the sky. Imagine the soul not as a ghost or a spark, but as a team. Picture a chariot carved from the light of the stars, racing across the dome of the heavens. In the driver's stand, the position of control, stands the charioteer. He is focused, his hands gripping the leather reins, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon, where the true forms of justice, beauty, and truth shine like mountain peaks. This charioteer is your reason. It is the part of you that plans, that knows what is good, that seeks to guide your life towards something higher than just the next meal. But look at the team pulling this chariot. They are not matched. On the right is a horse of noble breeding. It is white, upright, and cleanly limbed. It holds its head high, its nose curved like a Roman aqueduct. Its eyes are dark and modest. It loves honor, restraint, and modesty. It needs no whip. It responds to the slightest whisper of the charioteer. This is thumos, spirit. It is the part of you that feels righteous indignation, the part that puffs out its chest when you do something brave, the part that seeks glory and shames you when you fail. It is the soldier of the soul, disciplined and loyal. But on the left is the other horse. It is a massive, crooked beast. It is dark, perhaps black, or a muddy gray. Its neck is short and thick, its nose flat, its eyes bloodshot and gray. It is shaggy, deaf, and wild. It barely feels the whip, let alone the whisper. This is epithumia, appetite. It is the part of you that craves. It wants food, drink, sex, comfort, and it wants them now. It does not care about honor. It does not care about the destination. It only cares about the itch it wants to scratch. The tragedy and the glory of the human condition, Plato whispers, is that we are tied to both. The charioteer cannot simply cut the black horse loose, for without it, the chariot has no power, no forward momentum. But he cannot let it run free, or it will drag the whole team into the ditch. Watch the struggle in your mind's eye. It is a scene of intense, muscular tension. The charioteer sees the form of beauty, perhaps in the face of a beloved, or in a perfect idea. He steers the chariot toward it. The white horse steps proudly, ready to approach with reverence. But the black horse sees the beauty and surges forward, nostrils flaring, wanting to consume, to possess, to trample. The charioteer must pull back on the reins with all his might, leaning back until his knuckles are white, forcing the bit into the mouth of the wild beast, bringing it to its haunches. It is exhausting work. The leather straps creak, the wheels spin. The sweat pours down the charioteer's face. This is why life feels so hard. This is why we feel torn. It is not because we are broken. It is because we are complicated. We are trying to fly a machine that wants to run in two different directions at once. Scholars still argue whether Plato believed the black horse was evil or simply necessary. Did he want to kill our desires, or did he want to harness them? The text suggests a difficult truce. The black horse provides the raw energy of life. Without it, we would be statues, perfect but immobile. With it, we are dangerous, but we can move. The goal is not to destroy the beast, but to train it, to make it run in step with the noble white horse, so that the charioteer can lift the whole heavy breathing contraption up towards the roof of the sky. There is a lullaby in this chaos, if you listen closely. It is the lullaby of validation. Plato is telling you that your internal conflicts are not a sign of failure. They are the definition of being human. If you feel like part of you wants to be good and productive, the white horse, and another part just wants to sleep in and eat cake, the black horse, and a third part is exhausted from refereeing the match, the charioteer, congratulations. You are a functioning soul. You are flying the chariot. The myth goes on. Plato describes the procession of the gods, where the souls follow Zeus and the other deities on a ride to the very rim of the universe. There, if the horses are behaving, the charioteer can peek over the edge and see the plane of truth. He sees reality itself, colorless, shapeless, intangible essence. It is the food of the soul. A glimpse of it nourishes the wings of the chariot, making them grow strong and light. But if the black horse rebels, if the charioteer is weak or distracted, the chariot plunges. The wings wither, the feathers fall out, the soul drops from the sky, tumbling down through the ether, heavy and flightless, until it crashes into the earth and gets trapped in a body. That, Plato says, is why we are here. We are fallen charioteers, trying to remember how to fly. It is a beautiful, melancholy story. It explains our longing for something more. We remember the sky. We remember the smooth ride. We remember the view from the rim of the universe. And now, we are stuck with gravity, sore feet, and confusing desires. But tonight, you can put down the reins. The race is paused. The charioteer can sit down. The white horse can lower its proud head to graze. And even the wild black horse, the source of all that restless energy, is tired. Let it sleep. It does not need to be fought right now. In the realm of dreams, the struggle stops. The chariot is parked in a meadow of stars, silent and still. The image of the three, the driver and his two mismatched steeds, fades gently into the background. The tension in the leather straps slackens. The wheels stop turning. We leave the high drama of the soul's flight and prepare to descend again. But this time, we do not land in the safe, geometric garden of the academy. We land in a much darker, more dangerous reality. While Plato wrote about the metaphorical fall of the soul, his counterpart Diogenes was about to experience a very literal fall. He was about to lose his freedom entirely. The narrative shifts from the control of the mind to the loss of control of the body. We are moving from the heavens to the high seas, where the philosophical calm of the cynic is about to be tested by the brutal chaos of pirates. Prepare yourself for a journey across the water. The wind is picking up, the sails are snapping. The chariot of the soul is replaced by a merchant vessel, unaware that danger is waiting just over the horizon. But fear not, for the man on board has trained for this. He has his armor on the inside. The wind howls across the open water now, tearing at the sails of a merchant vessel bound for Aegina. We have left the ethereal, cloud-swept heights of Plato's chariot to plunge into the cold, salty reality of the Mediterranean. It is a dangerous time to be at sea. The year is uncertain, perhaps near the middle of the 4th century BC, and the waters are patrolling grounds for pirates. These are not the romanticized swashbucklers of later fiction. They are desperate, violent men led by a captain named Serpulus. They care nothing for philosophy or poverty. To them, a human being is merely cargo, muscle to be sold, breath to be priced. The ship is overtaken, the wooden hulls smash together with a sickening crunch. Shouts, the clash of iron, the smell of fear. The passengers huddle in the hold, terrified of the fate that awaits them. The slave markets of Crete. To be captured is to suffer a social death, to be stripped of one's name, city, and rights, becoming a living tool for another man's use. It is the ultimate nightmare for a Greek, for whom freedom is the very air of life. But in the midst of this panic, one passenger sits calmly, perhaps finishing a crust of bread. Diogenes looks at the pirates with the same detached curiosity he used on the chickens of Athens. When Serpulus, the pirate captain, demands to know why he isn't weeping like the others, Diogenes might have shrugged. Why should he fear? He owns nothing for them to steal. He has no position for them to topple. They can take his body, certainly, but his body is just a vessel, like the jar he sleeps in. The man inside is untouchable. The narrative moves to the slave market in Crete. The sun beats down on the auction block, a raised stone platform where human beings are displayed like cattle. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and the dust of the corral. Buyers from all over the Greek world are there. Wealthy landowners looking for field hands, aristocrats looking for tutors, merchants looking for porters. They prod the merchandise, checking teeth and muscles, haggling over prices. When it is Diogenes' turn to stand on the block, he does not slouch. He does not beg. He stands with the relaxed confidence of a guest at a dinner party. The herald, a man whose job is to hype the goods, asks him the standard question: "What is your trade? What are you good for?" The crowd waits for a standard answer: "I can cook," or "I can row," or "I can farm." Diogenes looks out over the sea of faces, faces etched with greed and anxiety, and replies in a loud, clear voice, "I know how to govern men." A ripple of laughter goes through the crowd. A slave who governs. It is absurd. But Diogenes is not finished. He raises a finger and points to a man in the crowd, A wealthy Corinthian merchant named Xeniades, who is wearing fine robes but looking rather overwhelmed by the chaos of the market. "Sell me to that man," Diogenes commands the herald, "for he looks like he needs a master." The laughter dies down, replaced by a stunned silence. The dynamic of the auction has been inverted. The slave is choosing the master. He is suggesting that Xeniades, with all his money, is actually the one who needs help, the one who doesn't know how to rule himself. Xeniades is intrigued. He steps forward. He looks into the eyes of this dirty, arrogant, mesmerizing old man and sees something rare. Absolute, terrifying honesty. He buys him. Historians still argue about the price. Some say it was a pittance. Others say Xeniades paid a premium for the sheer novelty of the man. But the transaction is made. Diogenes travels to Corinth, not as a prisoner, but as a kind of subversive house guest. Xeniades puts him in charge of his sons. This is where the story becomes a gentle domestic idyll. Imagine the household of Xeniades. It is a place of luxury, of soft cushions and heavy meals. But slowly, the influence of the dog begins to change the texture of their lives. Diogenes does not teach the boys geometry, as Plato would have. He does not force them to memorize long speeches. He teaches them to ride horses. He teaches them to shoot arrows. He teaches them to wait upon themselves, to dress simply, to drink water instead of wine. He takes away their soft shoes and tunics. He cuts their hair short. He takes them out into the hills of Corinth, teaching them to sleep on the ground and to read the weather. He is turning them into little stoics, toughening their bodies so their minds can be free. He teaches them to memorize the poets, yes, but only the passages that encourage strength and virtue. And the boys, they love him. Children often see through the pretense of adult society better than adults do. They find a freedom in Diogenes' rigor. They realize that they don't need the heavy robes or the servants to be happy. They learn that true power comes from needing less, not having more. One day, a friend asks Xeniades how the new slave is working out. Xeniades smiles, a genuine, relaxed smile, and says, "A good genius has entered my house." The irony is profound. Plato traveled to Syracuse to teach a king and was treated like a slave. Diogenes was sold as a slave and is treated like a king. Plato tried to impose order from the top down and failed. Diogenes built character from the bottom up and succeeded. There is a lullaby in this chapter of servitude. It whispers to us that our external circumstances do not define us. You can be in chains and still be free. You can be a CEO and still be a slave. Freedom is an internal posture. It is the ability to look at your master, whether it is a boss, a debt, or a social expectation, and say, "I am here because I choose to be, and I govern myself." As the years pass in Corinth, Diogenes grows old in the house of Xeniades. He is offered his freedom many times, but he often refuses or simply doesn't care. What difference does a piece of paper make? He is already the freest man in Greece. He eventually moves back to his jar, or perhaps stays in the garden, a fixture of the city, a beloved eccentric who has proven that dignity has nothing to do with status. The sun sets over the Corinthian Gulf, turning the water to a sheet of hammered bronze. The slave sits with his masters, the sons of Xeniades, who are now grown men, strong and capable. They sit in silence, watching the stars come out. The lesson has been learned. Governance is not about armies or taxes. It is about the soul. We leave the household of Xeniades now, wrapping this warm domestic scene around us like a blanket. The fear of the pirates has vanished. The humiliation of the auction block has been transformed into a triumph of wit. But the theme of governing men leads us back to the other side of the debate. Back in Athens, Plato is also thinking about love, teaching, and the connections between people. But he is not thinking about a master and a slave. He is thinking about a lover and a beloved. He is hosting a drinking party, a symposium, where the wine flows and the speeches soar toward the divine. We must prepare to leave the practical, dusty education of Diogenes and enter the candlelit room of Plato's most famous dialogue. We are going to climb the ladder of love. It is a journey that starts with the body but ends in the stars, and it asks the question that keeps us all awake at night. What are we actually looking for when we fall in love? The air shifts from the salty breeze of Corinth to the scent of perfumed oil and mixed wine. The flutes begin to play a low, hypnotic melody. The guests are reclining. The night is young, and the conversation is about to touch the very edge of heaven. The scent of roasting meat and unwashed bodies fades, replaced now by the heavy, intoxicating perfume of frankincense and the sweet, resinous aroma of Thasian wine. We have left the dusty streets of Corinth and the practical education of the slave market. We drift back across the years and the miles to Athens, to the year 416 BC. It is a night of celebration. The poet Agathon has just won the prize for his first tragedy at the Lenaea festival, and he is hosting a party for his friends. This is not a riotous tavern brawl. It is a symposium, literally a drinking together. It is a ritual of civilized pleasure, where the wine is mixed with water in a great crater. The flute girls play soft, hypnotic melodies, and the men recline on couches arranged in a square, creating a closed circuit of intimacy and intellect. The atmosphere is warm, flickering with the light of oil lamps that cast dancing shadows against the painted walls. The guests are the elite of Athens: Phaedrus, the young enthusiast; Pausanias, the legal expert; Aristophanes, the famous comic playwright; and of course, Socrates. He has arrived late, having stopped in a neighbor's porch to think, standing there like a statue while the party started without him. When he finally enters, he takes his place on the couch next to the host, his bare feet clean for once, though he still wears his old cloak. The topic of the night is eros, love. Each man must give a speech in praise of the god of desire. Imagine the feeling of being in that room. The wine warms your blood. The conversation flows like a river, winding through different definitions of what it means to love. Phaedrus speaks of love as a brave sacrifice. Pausanias distinguishes between common lust and heavenly connection. Then it is Aristophanes' turn. But here, history offers us a moment of human comedy to leaven the philosophy. The great playwright is seized by a sudden, violent case of the hiccups. He has to hold his breath and get someone to tickle his nose until he sneezes, proving that, even in the highest company, the body has a way of interrupting the mind with a joke. When he finally speaks, he tells a story that still haunts our romantic imagination. He says that humans were once round creatures with 4 arms, 4 legs, and 2 faces. We were powerful, so powerful, we threatened the gods. So Zeus cut us in half, like a sorb apple sliced for pickling. Now we are all just broken halves, wandering the earth, desperately searching for our missing match. When we find them, we wrap our arms around them and try to weld ourselves back together. It is a beautiful, tragic image, love as the healing of an ancient wound. But then Socrates speaks, and the room goes quiet. He does not give a speech of his own. He recounts a conversation he had years ago with a mysterious priestess named Diotima of Mantinea. Historians still argue whether Diotima was a real woman, perhaps a priestess who once saved Athens from plague, or a fictional creation of Plato's, a mask he wore to speak truths too delicate for a man. Through Socrates, she teaches us the ladder of love. Close your eyes and picture a ladder rising from the earth to the stars. The first rung is simple attraction. You see one beautiful body, a person you have a crush on, and you fall in love. It is intense, fiery, and possessive. This is where most of us start. We think, if I can just have this person, I will be happy. But if you climb to the second rung, you realize that the beauty in your beloved is not unique. It is shared by many. You see beauty in others, in a strong arm, a graceful neck, a bright smile. You begin to love physical beauty in general. The obsession with one person relaxes. You become a lover of all beautiful bodies. Then you climb higher. You realize that the beauty of a soul is more precious than the beauty of a body. You fall in love with someone's mind, their character, their laws, and their way of life. You start to love the beauty of institutions and ideas. You love justice. You love order. You love the way a well-run city hums like a beehive. Finally, you reach the top. You leave the people and the cities behind. You gaze upon the great sea of beauty itself. You see the form of beauty, absolute, pure, unchanging. It is not a face. It is an essence. It is the source of all the other beautiful things you saw on the way up. It is the sun that lights the moon. This is the climax of Plato's romantic vision. He is telling us that our earthly loves, our crushes, our marriages, our friendships are not the end goal. They are steps. They are training wheels for the soul. We practice loving a person so that we can eventually learn to love the good. The ache we feel when we are in love is not really for that person. It is a cosmic homesickness. We miss the beauty we knew before we were born. It is a stunning, vertigo-inducing idea. It takes the messiest, most confusing emotion we have, sexual desire, and turns it into a rocket ship to God. It explains why love feels so big, so overwhelming. It is big. It is the gravity of the spiritual universe pulling us home. As Socrates finishes, the room is spellbound. The applause is soft, reverent. The ladder of love hangs in the air, a shimmering possibility that we are not just animals seeking mates, but pilgrims seeking the divine. But just as the mood settles into this high, ethereal peace, there is a loud banging at the courtyard gate. The sound of flute girls and drunken shouting crashes in from the street. The heavy doors swing open, and in stumbles Alcibiades. He is the most famous, handsome, and dangerous man in Athens. He is drunk, supported by a flute girl, wearing a thick wreath of ivy and violets, with ribbons trailing over his eyes. He is the walking embodiment of the black horse, wild, charismatic, and out of control. He has come to crash the party. He sits down next to Socrates, draped in his finery, and begins a different kind of speech. He does not praise love. He praises Socrates. But it is a strange praise. He compares the philosopher to a satyr statue sold in the market, ugly on the outside, with bulging eyes and a snub nose. But, he says, if you open the statue up, there are golden images of the gods inside. Alcibiades confesses that he has tried to seduce Socrates, to trap him with his beauty and wealth. But Socrates never took the bait. The old philosopher just slept beside him like a father or an elder brother, completely unmoved by the temptation. It drove Alcibiades mad. He felt ashamed of his own vanity in the face of such self-control. He makes me admit that my political career is a waste of time, Alcibiades cries, and that I am neglecting my own soul. It is a moment of heartbreaking vulnerability. Alcibiades represents the tragedy of potential. He is the student who saw the light but couldn't leave the cave. He loves Socrates, but he loves the crowd's applause more. He is the man who climbed the first few rungs of the ladder and then got dizzy and fell off. The party dissolves into chaos. A fresh band of revelers bursts in. The order of the symposium is broken. The wine flows without measure. Guests fall asleep on the couches or stumble home. But watch Socrates. As the dawn breaks, a grey, cool light filtering through the high windows, he is the only one still awake. He has drunk everyone under the table, yet he is perfectly sober. He is calmly arguing with Agathon and Aristophanes that a man who can write comedy should also be able to write tragedy. They are nodding, half asleep, unable to follow him. Finally, they pass out. Socrates stands up. He arranges his cloak. He walks out of the house into the fresh morning air of Athens. He goes to the Lyceum to wash, and then spends the rest of the day discussing philosophy, exactly as he always does. The chaos of the night did not touch him. He has climbed the ladder, and he lives on the roof. There is a profound peace in this image of the morning after. The world is messy, full of drunk politicians, broken hearts, and confused lovers. But the philosopher walks through it with a steady step. He loves the world, but he is not addicted to it. He has seen the beauty that never fades. As we leave the house of Agathon, let the flute music fade. Let the arguments about love settle into a quiet warmth in your chest. You, too, are on that ladder. Every time you appreciate a beautiful song, a kind act, or a true idea, you are climbing. You are moving toward the light. But while Plato ascends to the heavens, we must remember that gravity always wins in the end. The body ages, the mind slows, and the city that birthed these ideas begins to crumble under the weight of history. We must travel forward now to the twilight years of our two protagonists. The parties are over. The lessons are taught. Now comes the final test. How to say goodbye to the world you spent a lifetime trying to understand. We drift away from the sunrise of 416 BC and move towards the sunset of the century. The shadows are getting longer. The old men are getting tired. And one final defiant act of currency defacement awaits us before the end. The flutes of the symposium have long since fallen silent. The wine has been drunk, the lovers have parted, and the golden age of Athens is beginning to rust. We move forward now, sliding through the decades to a time when the shadows are growing longer, both for the city and for our two philosophers. The Peloponnesian War has left deep scars. The city walls have been torn down and rebuilt. The confidence of the Periclean age, that bright, shining certainty that Athens was the school of Hellas, has faded into a more anxious, cynical pragmatism. In this twilight era, we find Diogenes, now an old man with a beard as white as sea foam, standing in the middle of the agora. He is doing something that looks, at first glance, like madness. He is standing in front of a marble statue of a stern-faced politician, holding out his hand, begging for a coin. He stands there for a long time, murmuring to the cold stone, waiting for a charity that will never come. Passers-by stop and stare. They whisper to one another. Look at the dog. Has he finally lost his mind? Does he think the stone will give him money? Finally, a young man, perhaps a student on his way to a lecture, approaches him. Diogenes, he asks gently, why are you begging from a statue? Diogenes turns his head slowly. His eyes are bright, crinkled at the edges, with a lifetime of squinting at the sun. I am practicing, he rasps, how to be rejected. It is a small joke, but it cuts deep. It reveals the core of his lifelong project, the revaluation of values. This is the true meaning of the oracle's command to deface the currency. He is not just talking about metal coins anymore. He is talking about the invisible currency of social approval. Most of us spend our entire lives terrified of rejection. We beg for validation from people who are as cold and unfeeling as statues, bosses, institutions, social circles. We fear the word no as if it were a physical blow. But Diogenes has realized that no is just a sound. It cannot hurt you unless you value the yes. By begging from a statue, he is training his soul to be indifferent to the outcome. He is defacing the currency of shame. If you do not care about the stamp of approval, you are free. The scene shifts. We follow the old cynic as he shuffles through the crowded market. He sees a group of wealthy men carrying bags of silver to the tables of the money changers. He watches them sweating, arguing, their faces tight with worry. He laughs. To him, they are the ones who are confused. They think the silver discs are valuable. But Diogenes knows that money is a fiction. It only has value because we all agree to pretend it does. It is a strange thing, he was known to say, that people will travel across the sea to buy a rare fish, but they will not cross the street to find a good man. He decides to demonstrate this absurdity. He walks into a lecture hall, perhaps even the academy itself, or a rival school, where a famous sophist is speaking about virtue. The room is packed. The audience is enraptured by the speaker's eloquent words, his perfectly balanced sentences, his beautiful voice. Diogenes listens for a moment, then reaches into his cloak and pulls out a salted fish. He holds it up. Heavier silence falls. Heads turn. The audience begins to giggle. The speaker falters, losing his rhythm. Diogenes waves the fish. The room erupts in laughter and confusion. The profound lecture is ruined by a piece of dried seafood. See? Diogenes says to the crowd. My fish has destroyed his philosophy. It is a crude prank, yes, but it is also a brilliant lesson in attention. He is showing them that their love of wisdom is fragile. It can be broken by a distraction as silly as a fish. Their values are not deep. They are superficial. They are chasing the currency of entertainment, not the currency of truth. Historians still argue about the extent of Diogenes' radicalism. Did he really perform all his bodily functions in public? Did he really eat raw meat to prove that cooking was an unnecessary luxury? The stories are likely exaggerated, but they point to a singular truth. He was trying to break the trance of civilization. He wanted to show that the things we think are necessary, privacy, polite conversation, cooked food, money, are just habits, and habits can be broken. Imagine the freedom of that realization. It is a terrifying freedom, but also a relief. It means that the rules you are so afraid of breaking are just lines drawn in the sand. You can step over them. You can be the one who doesn't care. Meanwhile, across the city, Plato is also thinking about the law. But he is not trying to break it. He is trying to rewrite it. In his final, longest work, The Laws, the old philosopher abandons the dream of the philosopher king. He realizes that finding a perfect ruler is unlikely. So, he designs a second-best city, a Magnesia, ruled not by a wise man, but by a rigid, unbending code of law. In this city, everything is regulated. The music, the dances, the marriages, the number of citizens, exactly 5,040 households. Even the drinking parties are strictly controlled. It is a vision of total order. It is the work of an old man who has seen too much chaos, too much war, too much betrayal. He wants to freeze the world in a perfect geometric pattern so that it can never hurt anyone again. The contrast is heartbreaking. Plato ends his life trying to build a cage to keep humanity safe. Diogenes ends his life trying to break every cage he sees to set humanity free. One seeks safety in the universal. The other seeks safety in the particular. Plato wants a law that applies to everyone, forever. Diogenes wants a moment of truth that applies to him, right now. Consider a moment where Diogenes is seen walking backward through a portico. The crowd laughs at him. "Why are you walking backward, old man?" They cheer. "I am practicing walking against the flow of the world," he replies. "You are the ones who are walking the wrong way. You just don't know it, because everyone else is doing it too." It is the currency of conformity he is attacking here. The stamp on the coin says, "Do what everyone else does." Diogenes takes his chisel and scratches it out. He stamps a new image. Do what makes sense to nature. As the evening light deepens into violet, turning the white marble of Athens to gray, we can see the sadness in this rebellion. Diogenes is lonely. To be the only one awake in a city of sleepwalkers is a burden. He has no wife, no children, no home. His only companions are the dogs and the few brave souls who dare to listen to him. But he does not complain. He has paid the price for his freedom, and he finds the coin of his own soul to be weight enough. There is a lullaby in this refusal. It tells us that we don't have to buy what the world is selling. We don't have to buy the idea that we are failures if we aren't rich. We don't have to buy the idea that we are ugly if we don't look like the statues. We can mint our own currency. We can decide that kindness is more valuable than gold. We can decide that a nap in the sun is more valuable than a promotion. The market is closing now. The money changers are packing up their tables, locking their heavy chests. The statues stand silent, watching the city empty out. Diogenes curls up in his jar, or perhaps under the colonnade of a temple. He has no chest to lock. He has no fear of thieves. He has spent the day defacing the world's illusions, and now he sleeps the deep, untroubled sleep of a man who is spiritually solvent. We leave the marketplace of values now. The old men are approaching the end of their long, divergent roads. The energy of the debate is softening into the quiet acceptance of mortality. The bodies that wrestled in the gymnasium, that lay in the sun, that traveled to Sicily, they are wearing out. We must prepare to say goodbye. We are moving toward the final years, where the arguments stop and the silence begins. It is a time for looking back, for seeing what remains when the noise of life finally fades away. The twilight is here, the shadows are long, and the final lesson is about to be taught, not with words, but with the simple act of leaving. The sun has finally set on the classical world. The long golden afternoon of Athens, the age of Pericles, the building of the Parthenon, the energy of the democracy, has faded into a violet twilight. We are in the year 323 BC. It is a year that hangs heavy in the history books, a year when the hinges of the world seem to turn. Far away in Babylon, Alexander the Great, the man who tried to swallow the earth whole, is burning with fever, his conquests ending in a final delirious gasp. But here in Greece, two other fires are quietly burning down to their embers. Plato is now an old man of 80. The broad shoulders that once wrestled in the games are stooped. The beard that was once dark and full is now thin and white as a cloud. He spends his days in the academy, but he walks slower now. The steep path to the Acropolis is too much for his knees. He prefers the flat, shaded walkways of the olive grove, where the ground is soft and the noise of the city is muffled by the trees. He is still writing. His final work, The Laws, is a massive, dense text, a fortress of words he is building to protect humanity from its own chaotic nature. But there is a change in him. The soaring poetry of his youth, the dramatic dialogues full of wit and characters, has given way to a drier, more rigid prose. It is the voice of a man who is tired of surprises. He has seen democracies turn into mobs. He has seen tyrants kill the wise. He wants to leave behind a system so perfect, so tightly wound, that it can run without him. Imagine him sitting in his study as the evening chill sets in. His hands, spotted with age, tremble slightly as he holds the stylus. He is trying to design a nocturnal council, a group of wise old men who will meet at dawn to oversee the laws of the city. It is a touching image. The philosopher, realizing he will not live to see the sunrise much longer, trying to create a guardian that never sleeps. He is lonely too. His beloved teacher Socrates has been dead for decades. His friends are gone. His students are respectful, but they are already beginning to change his teachings, to argue over the details. He realizes, perhaps with a heavy heart, that even the academy cannot be controlled forever. The forms, those perfect eternal realities he spent his life chasing, seem further away now, or perhaps, strangely, closer, as the veil of his own body begins to thin. Meanwhile, in Corinth, Diogenes is also reaching the end of his road. He is nearly 90 years old, an incredible age for a man who lived outside, exposed to every storm and frost. He has become a landmark of the city, like an old, weathered statue that everyone touches for luck. The sharp edges of his satire have softened. He barks less, he bites less. He spends long hours simply sitting in the Cranion Grove, watching the light change on the leaves. The people of Corinth have come to love their dog. When a group of rowdy boys once broke his jar, the city didn't punish the boys. They whipped them and then took up a collection to buy Diogenes a new jar. It was an admission that he belonged to them. He was their conscience. He was the one man who didn't want anything from them. And so he was the only one they could trust. Legends surround his final days. Some say he was seized by a fever. Others say he died by holding his breath, a final supreme act of willpower, proving that he could leave life whenever he chose, on his own terms. Another story, more fitting for a cynic, says he died after eating a raw octopus, trying one last time to prove that cooking was unnecessary, and his old digestion finally failed him. Or perhaps he was bitten by a dog, sharing the fate of the animal he admired most. Whatever the cause, there is no fear in his end. He does not write a will. He does not design a council. When asked how he wished to be buried, he supposedly replied, face down. When asked why, he rasped, "Because soon the world will turn upside down, and then I shall be right side up." It was a final joke, a last burst of laughter in the face of the solemnity of death. Back in Athens, Plato's end is gentler. The story goes that he died at a wedding feast. Imagine the scene. The music is playing, the flutes are weaving their melody through the air, the guests are laughing and drinking wine. The old philosopher, feeling weary, excuses himself. He does not go home. He simply retires to a quiet corner of the house, perhaps lying down on a couch in a shadowed alcove. The noise of the party, the celebration of life, of union, of the very human things he tried to regulate, hums in the background. He closes his eyes. The geometry of the room fades. The arguments about justice fade. The worry about the city fades. He drifts into sleep, and from sleep into the great silence. He dies as he lived, surrounded by beauty, but slightly apart from it, observing it from a distance. Historians often marvel that these two men, the poles of ancient thought, died in the same year, 323 BC. It is as if the universe decided to turn the page all at once. The man who wanted to build the perfect city, and the man who wanted to live in none. The man who wrote thousands of pages, and the man who wrote none. The aristocrat and the beggar. They left the stage together, leaving behind a silence that the Western world has been trying to fill ever since. There is a profound lullaby in this twilight of the giants. It reminds us that all striving eventually ceases. The books are written, or they are not. The jars are broken, or they are not. The arguments are won, or they are lost. In the end, the body claims its due. The featherless biped must finally lie down. Imagine the peace of that moment. The heavy mantle of responsibility slips from Plato's shoulders. The constant vigilance of the cynic relaxes in Diogenes' limbs. They are no longer the philosopher and the dog. They are just two tired old men returning to the earth that sustained them. The struggle of the charioteer is over. The horses have been unyoked. The lantern has been blown out. As the news of their deaths spreads, carried by messengers running along the coast roads, whispered in the marketplaces, a strange hush falls over Greece. The schools are closed in mourning. The students weep. But the world keeps turning. The sun comes up the next morning, indifferent to the loss of the minds that tried to understand it. We stand now at the threshold of the grave. The noise of their lives has stopped. What is left is memory. We must move to the final chapter of their story, to see how they were laid to rest, and how their legacies began to grow almost immediately, twisting like vines around the pillars of history. The transition is from the warm, breathing presence of the living to the cool, marble permanence of the dead. We are going to visit their tombs. One will be a monument to order, the other a monument to instinct. And in the silence of the graveyard, we might finally hear the harmony that eluded them in life. Let the image of the wedding feast fade. Let the image of the octopus and the jar fade. There is only the quiet earth now, waiting to receive its sons. The night is fully here. The stars are watching, just as Plato thought they would, perfect and eternal. While down below, the dust settles on two very different graves. The earth of Greece is rocky and thin, a skin of red dust stretched tight over a skeleton of limestone. It is not an easy earth to dig, yet in the year 323 BC, it opens twice to receive two of its most famous sons. The silence that follows their departure is not empty. It is filled with the sound of chisels on stone. We have reached the moment of memorialization, where the messy, breathing lives of men are turned into the cool, hard symbols of history. First, let us go to the academy. The mood here is one of heavy, reverent solemnity. Plato has died, and his students, grown men now, with grey in their own beards, are determined to honor him not just as a teacher, but as a founder of a new kind of religion. They do not bury him in a common grave. They lay him to rest within the very grounds he walked for 40 years. Imagine the monument they raise. It is not flamboyant, but it is precise. It is likely a shrine dedicated to the muses, the goddesses of inspiration, linking Plato's philosophy forever to the divine order of art and music. A statue is commissioned, perhaps by the sculptor Silanion, capturing the broad man in his prime, his brow furrowed in eternal thought, holding a book roll. This tomb is a statement. It says, truth can be preserved. It says that wisdom is something solid, something that can be built like a wall and defended like a fortress. The students, led by his nephew Speusippus, begin the work of copying his dialogues. They carefully transcribe the Republic, the Phaedo, the Symposium onto fresh papyrus. They organize the library. They set the curriculum. They are turning a man into an institution. This is the legacy of order. Plato leaves behind a physical structure, the academy, that will last for nearly 900 years. It will survive wars, invasions, and the rise of Rome. It will become the lighthouse of the Western mind. To visit his tomb is to visit the headquarters of reason itself. It feels safe. It feels permanent. It is a victory of architecture over death. Now, travel south to Corinth. The scene at the gate of the isthmus is different. Diogenes has died, but he left behind instructions that were a final, shocking act of defiance. Throw me over the wall, he had said. Let the dogs and the birds have me. When his friends asked if he minded being eaten, he had laughed. Not at all, he rasped. Just make sure you put a stick near me so I can chase them away. But you will be dead, they said. You won't feel anything. Exactly, Diogenes replied. If I don't feel anything, why should I care what happens to the carcass? It was his last lesson. The body is just a shell. Do not worship it. Do not waste money on it. But the Corinthians, to their credit, or perhaps their shame, cannot bear to obey him. They love their dog too much to treat him like one. They ignore his request. They cannot let him dissolve into the wild nature he loved. Instead, they give him a magnificent funeral. They bury him near the city gate, where the travelers pass. And over his grave, they raise a pillar of Parian marble, the finest, whitest stone in the world. And on top of this pillar, they place a statue. But it is not a statue of a man holding a scroll. It is a statue of a dog. Imagine the irony carved in stone. The man who hated luxury is buried under expensive marble. The man who mocked statues has become one. But look closer at the inscription they carved beneath the animal. It is a poem, a lullaby of praise that softens the irony into something beautiful. Even bronze grows old with time. But your fame, Diogenes, not even eternity will destroy, for you alone showed mortals the road to self-sufficiency and the easiest path of life. There is a profound difference between these two tombs. Plato's tomb is a library. It invites you to read, to study, to climb the difficult ladder of knowledge. Diogenes' tomb is a signpost. It invites you to stop, to breathe, to realize that the easiest path is already under your feet. Plato's legacy is heavy. It is the weight of all the books ever written, all the laws ever passed, all the universities ever built. It is the burden of civilization, the need to maintain the structure, to keep the roof from falling in. It requires constant maintenance. The texts must be copied. The arguments must be defended. The walls must be repaired. Diogenes' legacy is light. He left no books. He wrote no laws. He built no school. His legacy is carried not in papyrus, but in the wind. It is in the laughter of a child who realizes he doesn't need a toy to be happy. It is in the sigh of a man who quits a job he hates to live a simpler life. It is in the freedom of a stray dog sleeping in the sun. You cannot burn Diogenes' legacy because it was never written down. It is a spirit, a mood, a sudden clarity that strikes you when you realize you are carrying too much baggage. Yet, in the end, the earth claims them both. The red dust of Greece does not care about the forms or the physis. It wraps them in the same cold embrace. The atoms that made up the brain of the greatest metaphysician disperse into the roots of the olive trees. The atoms that made up the body of the most stubborn cynic disperse into the weeds by the roadside. There is a peace in this equalization. Death is the one definition Diogenes could not mock, and the one form Plato could not perfect. It is the ultimate reality, and in facing it, they finally found the common ground that eluded them in life. They both became silence. As the centuries roll forward, the marble of their tombs begins to weather. The nose of Plato's statue chips away. The bronze dog of Diogenes turns green with oxidation. The Roman Empire rises, turning Greece into a province. The legions march past the academy, respecting it but changing it. They march past the pillar in Corinth, perhaps laughing at the dog, perhaps wondering who the man was. But the argument does not die with the stone. It moves into the blood of the West. It becomes a ghostly conversation that happens inside every human head. Every time you organize your desk, you are visiting Plato's tomb. Every time you throw away something you don't need, you are visiting Diogenes' tomb. Every time you vote for a law, you are with the academic. Every time you question authority, you are with the cynic. They are the twin poles of our consciousness. We build the city with Plato, and we escape it with Diogenes. We need the walls to feel safe, but we need the gate to feel free. The night is deep now over the graveyard of history. The tourists have gone home. The archaeologists have put down their brushes. The wind blows through the cypress trees, a sound like a long, hushed hush. It is the sound of time erasing the details, leaving only the essence. We leave the tombs behind. We leave the marble and the bronze. We drift forward, carried by that wind, out of the ancient world entirely. We are moving towards the final reflection, the echo that reaches us tonight, in our own beds, in our own confusing, noisy, beautiful century. The story is almost done. The two fighters have gone to sleep, but the bell they rang is still vibrating. We must listen to its last, long note. We must ask ourselves, as we drift toward our own rest, which voice speaks louder in our dreams tonight? The one that says, build a better world, or the one that says, the world is already perfect. You just need to open your eyes. The transition is gentle. The heavy stone dissolves into mist. The ancient dates fade away. There is only the present moment left. The quiet room where you lie, the soft pillow, and the lingering question of how to live. The marble tombs of Greece have faded into the mists of time, but the argument they mark has never truly ended. It has simply changed its voice. We drift now out of the ancient world and into the quiet, invisible spaces of your own life. The year is no longer 323 BC. It is tonight. It is the present moment, humming with the low electric vibration of the modern world. And yet, if you listen closely to the thoughts that circle your mind before sleep, you will hear them still. The architect and the vagabond, Plato and Diogenes, whispering their eternal debate in the corridors of your own soul. They are the twin ghosts of the human condition. They are not dead. They are frequencies that tune our reality. Plato lives on in every urge we have to build, to improve, to perfect. When you set an alarm for the morning, that is Plato. You are imposing order on the chaos of time. When you organize your closet, placing shirts by color and season, you are seeking the form of the good in your wardrobe. When we look at the messy, painful state of the world and think, there must be a better way, there must be a system that works, we are channeling the spirit of the academy. He is the patron saint of our anxiety. He is the voice that says we are not finished yet. He drives the scientist to find the cure, the artist to paint the masterpiece, the parent to raise the child right. He is the noble, exhausting ambition that built the skyscrapers, wrote the constitutions, and mapped the stars. He believes that if we just try hard enough, if we just think clearly enough, we can fix the broken pottery of existence and glue it back into a perfect vase. But Diogenes lives on too. He is the shadow that laughs at the light when you feel the sudden, desperate urge to throw your phone into the river and walk away from your emails. That is Diogenes. When you look at a luxury car and see not status, but a metal cage with monthly payments, you are seeing through the eyes of the cynic. When you decide to stay in on a Friday night, wearing your oldest, softest clothes, eating cereal for dinner, and realizing you are perfectly happy, you are curled up in the jar. He is the patron saint of our relief. He is the voice that says, "You are enough." He reminds us that the rat race is voluntary. He whispers that the world is not a project to be managed, but a garden to be enjoyed. He believes that we are not fallen angels trying to get back to heaven, but clever animals who have forgotten how to play in the dirt. The tension between them is what makes us human. If we were only Plato, we would burn out, crushed by the weight of our own ideals, forever disappointed that reality is not geometry. We would be perfect, crystalline, and cold. If we were only Diogenes, we would never build a hospital or write a symphony. We would be free, yes, but we might also be lonely, howling at the moon without a song to sing back to it. Perhaps the wisdom is not in choosing one over the other, but in letting them dance. History suggests they need each other. Order needs the laugh of freedom to keep it from becoming tyranny. Freedom needs the structure of order to keep it from becoming chaos. Think of your own life as a conversation between these two friends. During the day, you are Plato. You work, you plan, you care about the opinion of your boss. You try to be a good citizen. You drive the chariot. You rein in the horses. You strive for the summit. And that is good. It is noble work to hold the world together. But at night, you can be Diogenes. You can take off the armor. You can put down the reins. You can retreat into your own private tub, your bed, and shut out the noise of the empire. You can realize that, for the next 8 hours, you do not need to achieve anything. You do not need to be impressive. You do not need to be featherless bipeds with broad, flat nails. You can just be a breathing thing, warm and safe, demanding nothing from the universe but a little bit of darkness and a little bit of peace. The modern world is loud. It sells us endless desires. It tells us we need the new phone, the better body, the perfect career. It is a marketplace more chaotic than Athens ever was. But the ancient antidote is still potent. You have the power to deface the currency. You have the power to say, this worry has no value here. You have the power to blow out the lantern and stop looking for a better version of yourself. Because the version that is breathing right now is already a miracle. As we reach the end of this long journey, imagine the two old men finally meeting in a place beyond time. No longer rivals, no longer separated by pride or poverty. Imagine Plato, the wrestler, finally relaxing his shoulders, admitting that the universe is too big to be caught in a definition. Imagine Diogenes, the beggar, finally accepting a seat at the table, admitting that it is nice, sometimes, to have a roof over one's head. They are sitting by a fire that never goes out. They are watching the sparks fly up into the eternal night. They are smiling at us. They know how hard it is to be human. They know how hard it is to carry the weight of a mind that wants everything, Plato, and a body that needs almost nothing, Diogenes. They offer us a truce. Rest now, Plato whispers. The city is built. The walls are strong. You have done your duty to the day. The forms will still be there when you wake up. You can put down the blueprint. Sleep now, Diogenes rasps, his voice soft as dry leaves. The ground is soft enough. The dark is kind. You don't need to be anyone for a while. You can just be. The sun will find you in the morning without you asking for it. The argument is over. The echoes fade. The library of the academy turns off its lights, one by one. The marketplace of Corinth falls silent, the dust settling on the stones. The ships are docked, the dogs are asleep. The chattering of the mind slows down, matching the rhythm of the earth itself. You are the vessel that holds them both. But tonight, you are just the vessel. You are the space where the noise stops. You are the stillness between the thoughts. You have walked through the centuries, seen the rise and fall of kings, the birth of ideas, the shattering of cups, and the building of dreams. You have seen that everything changes, everything passes, except for this one simple, undeniable fact. You are here. You are safe. You are free. The lantern is out. The cave is dark, but it is a comforting darkness now. It is the womb of sleep. Let the history book close. Let the philosophy dissolve into dreams. The last question has been asked, and the answer is silence. The journey is complete. The long road from the sun-drenched agora to the quiet of your own room has ended. We have walked with giants, argued with ghosts, and laughed with beggars. Now, the time for thinking is done. The time for being is here. Let your breathing deepen. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the mattress, just as Diogenes sank into the earth, just as Plato sank into the mystery. There is no more need to strive. There is no more need to define. The featherless biped is resting. The political animal is sleeping. Imagine a soft, heavy curtain of velvet being drawn across the stage of your mind. The characters are bowing and exiting. The lights are dimming to a warm, low glow. The silence of the centuries is wrapping around you like a heavy quilt. You are safe in the balance. You have the stars above you and the earth beneath you. You have the order of the night sky and the freedom of your dreams. You don't have to choose between them. You can float in the space between, weightless and untroubled. Drift now. Drift away from Athens. Drift away from the questions. Drift into the deep, welcoming harbor of sleep. The philosophy is over. The lullaby remains. Sweet dreams.